I pulled it up. It's
I have the
not,
month of
it's not
February,
live
so
yet.
you know,
we
it's
have
not
to say we have
appropriate for
February
February.
yet.
Right.
Maybe
But,
future
gentlemen, if
podcast.
I could have your attention for a quick moment, we are going to bring the live stream online.
So what's
and
your
let people
language?
filter in. So
We
what-
are live.
So behave.
What's I doing?
Okay, they set up the projector while that's doing its
Well, we're
thing.
never having the convention in that state, I can tell you that for damn sure.
Let's see what's that.
I'm just doing that for the live stream.
All right.
Very, very helpful way to get the 3 people that are watching this.
4.
With another laptop for it?
Well, I'm really hoping
Steam coming in
that
there.
Johnny dials in and is giving me feedback in my ear as well. We'll see. He's 6, so.
On the documents, I also have the,
Alex, you're our only visual anything.
Well, that's all we need.
See, that's why I moved this way this time.
That's all we need.
We got there.
It's got a really, like, you know, basement terrorist video vibe.
Yeah. Just to get all the battery packs out, make it look more. Hello.
JW conference, is that correct?
Usual. Same jokes, different day.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
this has no cap.
I do like these tapes have a little more room than the last time.
Mouse, need it. Maybe not. Just hit it there. That goes up. Power. This is power. That's power.
Oh, power for the,
Projector.
right, which means we're gonna need a, power strip here. We have one more power strip in there.
Oh, no, there's where. There should be power in here, under here somewhere, I think.
Oh, well, they gave us this, but I suspect there'll be more. If not, yeah, there is.
And here's an HDMI. Record.
Didn't they give us a notepad somewhere?
Okay.
Thank you, Lauren.
Got it.
Is there a book of agendas or something like that, or? No?
So just the file that Karen Ann sends out. Okay.
Should get an HDMI.
Isn't that what that is?
Is it a server space?
Oh, okay, try
That's
that.
the use?
Yeah, we can try that.
Well, yeah.
Let's see, did they give us
If
one?
somebody has a little data thingy, it might be good to go next door and at least have the agendas printed off.
Well, I guess we bring.
How are you, Mr. Boyd?
Doing okay.
Interesting point.
You think that's preferred?
This goes to their projector, which I don't know where it is. So let's connect ours. This is what you've always used in the past.
Yeah, well.
Is he now
we've used
known as
various
Mr.
things
Fox?
in the past.
All right, let's see how this works.
Is that the way it goes in Illinois?
He hasn't moved yet.
Should be somewhere.
I think he is known as Julie Fox's lesser man.
A match made in heaven.
Well, actually, it struck me. I moved back to Virginia in '86 to work on my doctorate. And I met Bill at the 1966, what I called the Bash in Bethesda, which was Advocates for Self-Government, had a major conference. I met Bill and Mark Montone, same day. And so when Bill leaves, basically ever since I came back to Virginia, Bill Redpath has also been in Virginia. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I serious.
It's breaking up that romance, you know?
Well, but Bill is the reason why I ended up winning awards cooking chili. I mean, because I practiced my chops with red pan, because every time I come up to visit Bill, I cook chili for him, and I cook a lot so that he can put it in the freezer and have it there for him.
Have sustenance later.
And so I have honed my chops cooking chili for several years for Bill Redpath, and this allowed me to go off and win the awards for cooking chili. So
I'm sure
I
Julie
owe it
won't
all to
mind
him.
if you come into her kitchen and cook them a batch of chili or two.
There are some people you do not want to enter their kitchen and do anything other than get out of the way. You can get stabbed.
Not
I'm
quite
not
at
quite
stab
that bad.
level, but I'm gonna give you the stink eye. I'm gonna watch him real careful.
Do you need power?
Yeah. Thank you.
I saved you a seat.
Oh, awesome.
So
Hey, Elizabeth.
what happened in October doesn't happen.
I don't see any coffee in here. At least not readily available. Other people may have it, but
Food like across the hall, I can get
You're gonna feel it.
Oh, Whitney, did you get that across the hall?
Does somebody have a knife?
I did.
you mean here?
It's like the food area. I want to go get coffee. It's the concierge. Okay.
There's a Starbucks, Elizabeth, on the second floor, all the way at the other end of the lobby.
Okay, yeah, I may or may not get back in time if I go that route. Thank you, though. That's super good to know.
I think you have time to get down there and back, unless there's a big line there.
I'm too cheap for Starbucks.
And I don't drink coffee, I actually drink tea, but Starbucks has a refresher that I really like. Too damn expensive, but
Where's the,
I mean, that was super nice of you, though, wasn't it? Yeah.
Good morning. It's nice to see you again.
I just didn't know that's how it worked.
Enjoyed having the chance to chat with you.
did somebody say there's a link for the,
It was lovely. It was very spur of the moment.
The OneDrive, the OneNote.
Yeah.
Sam, is that what you're looking for? The OneNote?
did Karen Ann send out a revised agenda?
All I have is her OneNote. Let me see. I don't know if it's been revised.
I know you need it.
No, she hasn't sent out the new one yet.
You can go, you guys can go to yours. Or auction off for a good price, whichever.
Can push it down.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, I was gonna go have these printed if we get them.
Oh, thank you.
And John, how are you today? I'm waking up. We were out late last night. For me, anyway. We got back to the hotel around midnight.
I was a good boy, I went to bed early.
Yeah, so did I. One. Just because of what my flight is. Steve, how you doing?
I like to go back to the hotel before I like to go back to my room before it got dark.
Good. How are you? I'm fine, thank you, sir.
How you doing? Nice to see you. Get one of those CDs.
Richard, you're moving closer.
I know, right?
Yeah. Dropping your new mixtape? Yeah.
I hope Lisa's not mad at you for taking her seat.
You know, that's a good point. If she wants me to move, I will, because I know how
She'll be okay.
I seem to move every single meeting. I'm never consistent. I'm the one who's always jumping around somewhere.
That's fine. Keep it popping.
Right? I realized last time you could see me 100% on the video, and I'm like, not this time.
Sister Jewett, how are you?
Okay.
Keep telling that's Jim to you, buddy.
Sorry. No, I know, but
Checks paper.
I got a whole bunch of phones. There you go. You go look at either one.
And they're much bigger.
I'll meet you out.
They're much bigger than this.
I can't even get my kids. What's your name? And then, you know, that kind of stuff.
It was smart, except I didn't sleep very well.
The streaming link is on our YouTube, is that right?
We went to
Have you already posted it? You have.
my generation doesn't get on there. They really were, but it's a good concert.
We have a,
It's the first time I've ever seen it.
I used to do some acting stuff.
I know, it's been an exciting time. Yes, sir. How's it been over here?
Oh, it's been good. The other strange thing is
Stay busy.
Yes. Same here.
we have started well, that was what John Ford did.
Hey, how are you? Good. All right, we have a mic here. We'll be here in a few minutes.
I think we found a way around this. Well, so
Most recent one.
Looking up, we were out to get
Oh, sure, yeah, I remember the nuclear name level. They didn't actually see this.
they said
Okay, well, okay, all right, so they want to do a party petition at 10. Correct. Can they start any time with the party? They have 90 days. More ahead of it.
It's like a full day to the cafe.
I brought these in packets.
The one you can plug in the mic. Yeah, but I haven't just used it. I mean, it's like I got one here and I got one here. Honestly, plug in my new one. I never said
so. I turned last night.
yes.
I was back in my room.
Like, always prepared. Yeah. Oh, nice.
We talked about how
How was that? I know the whole. Because I did customs, but I never went to the. I forgot the past couple of years. Just that connection.
Alicia, you want me to move? You want me to move? I didn't realize. No, it's not. A little closer. Okay. Yeah, and I don't think anybody's. I just think we'll be on camera. Close enough to not be on camera. Yeah, it's not really going to be any different. Last time I realized I was there just like the whole time.
It's harder for me and Jeff to cut up from here, so you
That's
have
just
to
for,
trade off.
see, that's what it is. I got separate.
Yeah, we did.
I do. Yeah, I can. He likes it.
Yeah.
I'm going to strike that whole thing.
Or we agreed to strike.
No, I'm doing it as we speak.
Oh, am I out? You offered to stay for Thursday, 30.
they were down there.
Yeah, we got it. But he was here and he was right there.
It's not just gonna call it.
So when you get
Interesting picture up there.
I'm okay. Yeah. Last night, I got 6.5 hours sleep, which is 3 times what I got the night before. Yeah, now it's just irritating to cheer. My body was like, hey, what is this you're doing? This is making me.
I've been watching these parliaments already. I think
Last year I
Yeah, viewers out there. Yeah, it's also festival. It's Fashion Day, so it's a terrible day for people gone. And she just really don't know the other day. I mean, a good day, a good weekend history day, actually over 100. And I tell them signatures across the side. It's also festival. Last time we petitioned, we did 331 in 2 days. Yeah, it's 50% above more bodies. Yeah, Noah worked. Noah Spencer worked on yours some hours.
and if you know, if you've been in Liverpool, that's so funny.
We appreciate borrowing him for the weekend.
I'm not going back next year because the Cardinals are going to play.
I feel like there's something else.
As I said,
No, I thought it was right here. This is a membership. I didn't figure if I mailed it.
Would you like an album?
Certainly would.
Stan's fired new list. We're going to take this turn through those. No, Johnson, I got yeah, I don't like rock and roll. You got me. I don't agree. So it's delayed.
I might have an extra, not with me, but.
So, yes. So, what else? Go to Dallas Fort Worth, haven't been to the Rangers.
I went on fancy. I got the flip.
Okay, where in Ohio?
Look at that.
That's like 50 stadiums I've seen. He's right. Oh, yes. On US 23, yes. Go through Delaware, you go through Delaware.
Leftover from last week.
Okay.
Like, that's wrong.
No,
there's a
Fruit statement on the back.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes. I wonder if I can hold this while I'm playing live.
Depends on where you are. If you're in Nevada, yes. If you're in Atlantic City, no. And that should be your best statement as to how good it is. Yes, you could do that. Yeah, October. That'll be.
If I meet junk food, until you open your mouth and I toss it down.
I'll enjoy the
Throw the fish in the
entertainment.
seal. Yeah.
So if we reach it over like this and we try to grab each other, we might get through it.
It
Yeah,
happens.
it happens. Yeah. Jeff knows I bring the good junk. My stuff.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Austin. Sorry, I'll find my voice eventually. It is 9:01 a.m. local time. My apologies for being 1 minute late. We have a proposed agenda, and I would say before we consider changes to it, we will start with opportunity for public comment. Dr. Lark.
Mr. Chairman, I think it is appropriate at this meeting, pardon me, to recognize a former chair of this body, former presidential candidate of this party, David Berkeley, who passed away in the interim between our last meeting and this one.
I agree. Mr. Berglund was an inspiration to me going back to the very beginning of my involvement in the party. I didn't know I was a libertarian until I was probably around 10 or 12 years old and read a copy of Libertarianism in One Lesson that my father had on his bookshelf. And it all made sense to me, and I haven't been anything ever since. And I think the party, and I know myself personally, is deeply in his debt, and he will be missed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hewitt?
Since everything in Texas is bigger and so were the drinks last night, I move that we adjourn until tomorrow morning and get all this done in one day.
Moved and seconded. Unfortunately, we are in public comment time, and so you'll need to be recognized as business. But now that everyone knows what you're going to do, we'll see how that goes. Valued effort. Any comment from the gallery? Any of our guests who would like to speak, be recognized? Please just show a hand, say hello. Seeing none, I would just thank everyone who took the time out of their day to come and attend an LNC meeting. We know you have many entertainment options, and we are both confused and pleased that you've chosen us today. With that, we will be done with public comment, and the next item on the housekeeping portion of the agenda is attendance, credentials report, and paperwork check. Mr. Redpath? Oh.
No, I was just stretching my arm.
Okay.
Just getting warmed up.
He's got a lot to say.
Do you want to take attendance? Would you like me to?
I would like you to.
Okay, I'd love to. Now I gotta find my list.
Yeah, that's what I was. All right, we got 4 officers. They appear to be here.
They are.
We got 5 at-larges. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We'll go.
We got 5 at-larges.
1.
Reason 1, reason 2. There's, she's 3.
4.
4, 5,
5.
6.
7.
8.
We don't have more than that.
All right, so
And
Lyons is here in
Lyons
place
is here in
of-
lieu of O'Donnell.
Aaron Adams is here.
Aaron Adams is here.
Where's Dave
Brent is there.
Brent.
Doctorals.
We don't need no stinking list.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna, as far as paperwork check, does everyone have a copy of the agenda front and back? Yeah.
There's a back.
There's a back. I think all the other reports have been sent out electronically. I believe they've been put into a OneNote by the secretary.
Yep, except for affiliate support, which I will get up there shortly. They just got it.
And I'm just making sure that I have the OneNote link.
Can you send it out again to somebody?
I will, as soon as I find it, I will send it back out to the list.
I sent it last night again, or yesterday afternoon. My little
a donut.
trying to figure out a different way to do it.
Meeting housekeeping is not spam. Not spam. Find it again.
Pull it up here too.
And I will forward this to the list right now. And sent. All right. The next item on the agenda, unless there's anything else with attendance, credentials, and paperwork, is Ms. Matson wanted 10 minutes to reconsider the committee votes.
Isn't that left over from last meeting? It may be
It
left in
may
the
be left
template.
over from last meeting.
That was.
It was a very
yeah, that was
interesting
March.
technical discussion.
You want to do it again?
Oh, why not? Just for fun. I know we got nothing to do.
Was looking to be recognized.
So I think that's a leftover from your template from
Oh, that's right. It's
the
done
March.
now. Excuse me.
Ms. Matson, if you could just explain, with the indulgence of the body, where you think we are and what we ought to do.
On that item?
On that item.
We already did it in March. That was the email ballot that we redid by paper ballot during the meeting for the Convention Voting Process Committee and Membership Support Committee. And we redid it in March by paper ballot, and they're elected and functional committees now.
She won already.
We've been meeting.
Wait, I'm confused. Why is it on the agenda then?
I think when you copy pasted maybe your agenda from last time and modified it, it stayed on there. That's
Okay.
my guess. I didn't request it.
If that's an error, there was something that you did request though.
There are two items that I did request.
Okay,
and they are
so-
under new business
Yes,
with
that
previous
was me
notice.
getting confused, and so we'll just
Yeah,
strike
yeah.
that, and I apologize. All right.
Too
then-
much barbecue
We're
last
zooming
night.
along.
I ate barbecue last night.
I did. Maybe not enough barbecue then.
It's conveniently easy.
Then we would next move to adoption of the agenda.
I had, oh, okay, sorry, yes. Thank
Did you have some, okay, I figured
Yes.
that was where we are. We have 10 minutes for that. I have some notes from people that sent emails. So Ms. Harlos had requested a policy manual style review on Sunday, which would be in new business
That was
without
left over last.
previous notice.
Yeah, because I asked for it to, last meeting.
Okay. How long?
Well, I sent it out. You guys seen how extensive it is. I'd ask the body how long they would think. Most of it is simply stylistic, but that might be my opinion and not the opinion of other people.
Is there any objection to adding it to the agenda?
And
Where and how much?
Well, I was inquiring of Ms. Harlos how long she wanted.
I will bid 10 minutes.
Okay. So it would be 10 minutes, and I would put it at new business without previous notice.
I had previous notice.
So after policy manual amendment,
In new business with previous notice after policy manual amendment orientation.
Technically, I wouldn't-
Negative.
I'd ask it to be in without, we got notice yesterday.
Okay.
Yes.
It's on, it's been on the past two meeting agendas. And last meeting.
The idea,
The
not the
subject,
actual
we didn't have the
language.
text of the motion till, like, while we were in transit to the meeting here. So
Well, if there's
it's-
no objection, it really doesn't matter anyway. but-
Well, it makes a difference in what it takes to adopt it, so please notice that previous notice in the policy manual requires emailing to the text of the motion 2 weeks prior to our email list.
Is it policy manual amendments? Is that the
Yeah.
deal for
Is
10
it-
minutes?
It's
policy
style
manual.
changes.
Style changes for 10 minutes.
without previous notice.
All right.
Well, I'd still object to it without previous notice, because the same thing happened last time, and it was on with previous notice, and we struck it after the meeting even started, and there was no objection the past 2 meetings to having it with previous notice. So it seems kind of odd to me when we move it from one meeting to another that all of a sudden now there's an objection to it.
It was a subject, it was not the text of the motion.
Dr. Lark?
Yeah, my apologies, Ms. Harless. I'm getting senile. Was the actual text of the motion distributed prior?
No, because it isn't necessarily a motion. It was that I was going to propose style changes, to do a comprehensive review of the policy manual, and I worked on it with Mr. Hagan and Mr. Seebeck from Colorado. So I sent the marked up copy. If that's considered the motion, then no. But the fact of what it was going to be has been talked about for 6 months.
Dr. Lark?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, while I understand Ms. Harless's concern here, I think that if we haven't actually seen it with the notice, I think that it ought to be considered without notice.
So there's a difference of opinion.
I won't argue about it.
Then with the withdrawal of the argument about it would go in under new business with previous notice for 10 minutes. Without, sorry. Thank you. The next one I had from the email was 10 minutes for policy manual amendment about functional allocation of expenses from Mr. Hagan. I would put that right after this under new business without previous notice. Is there any objection to that, or do you need it earlier?
I don't know if Julie would want to have anything inputs for that. As the policy manual changes that Robert suggested.
Well, I was going to talk about it during my audit report, but that was in terms of the financial report.
So that would be in the discussion of the reason for it, but that doesn't affect when we would vote on it.
All right.
Right.
So unless there's objection, that will go for 10 minutes after the style review of the policy manual. Mr. Lyons had sent an email asking for time to discuss the financial future of the party as a separate agenda item. I had not added it as an agenda item because I wanted to allow this body to decide how they want to approach that whole subject, whether they wanted to do it within the context of staff reports or the chair's report or something else entirely. So Mr. Lyons,
Mr. Chair, I
what
think
would
it'd
you
be
propose?
wise to take this matter up directly after the executive director and development director reports.
For how long?
I'd like to request an hour.
So that would be after staff reports?
That would be after staff reports, before or after the council's report. You want to take it immediately, so
Yes.
prior to the council's report. Okay? Is there objection to that? Go ahead, Dr. Lark.
An hour seems, I would prefer 30 minutes.
Second.
Mr. Lyons, do you have any objection to 30 minutes?
No.
We can extend.
Okay. So I'm putting that at 30 minutes after the conclusion of the staff report. Mr. Goldstein.
I'd like to ask Mr. Lyons if you think any portion of that discussion might be in executive session.
Absolutely.
All right.
When you're done with all that, I'd like to be recognized, Mr. Chairman, after your earlier.
The last one that I had in the email was 10 minutes from Ms. Harlos for the timing of the bylaws, platform, and credentials committee.
Yes. Well, I asked for me and Richard, I believe, to be on it, because it was some inquiries from Region 1.
Yeah, there's some updated brochures that were sent out.
Oh, the brochures, but also committee, people were asking me from Region 1 about committee appointments.
They've not been asking me, so
You know
congratulations.
how
No, I don't know how it's really, you're really annoying.
Okay.
It's not my agenda item, sir.
Okay.
Oh, then mine will be
So
fine.
this is the timing of the elections.
I've had some questions too.
For credentials, platform, and bylaws. after the functional allocation of expenses item for Mr. Hagan for 10 minutes. Mr. Longstreth, did you have a request that I did not?
Negative, sir. You got them all as far as I'm aware.
Okay. Is there anyone else who had a request that I did not get? And I'm going to go to Mr. Redpath first because I'm done with what's written on my list. Mr. Redpath.
Two things. One, before we adjourn today, while we're all together, because I don't know when people are peeling out tomorrow, but while we are still all together, I would like to discuss the citing of the November meeting. I think that would be wise to do at the end of business today before we depart for the evening.
So I'm going to put site of November meeting.
And secondly,
for 10 minutes?
Sure.
And I'm going to put that prior to evening adjournment, whatever that may be. So we just have to keep an eye on that 10 minutes.
Okay. And then also regarding the presentation from RCV Colorado, there is no one here. I did not become cognizant until this morning that nobody from RCV Colorado was actually here.
Oh.
I have been asked to make the RCV Colorado presentation today. Okay, I have not seen this. Have you received it, Madam Secretary?
Okay. No, I just found this out yesterday that all of a sudden they're like, oh, we punted it to Faribault. And I'm like, okay. I was like, maybe you want to do this next meeting because this is all very last minute.
Okay,
And
well.
so they asked, because they told me, oh, you'll find, somebody will show up. And I'm like, that's not really the way it works.
So unless there's an objection, I am going to strike that from our agenda.
Okay, I'm willing to make the presentation, but there is a PowerPoint that I asked to be emailed to chair@lp.org and secretary at lp.org. Have you received it yet? You have not received the PowerPoint?
No.
And you have any?
I am going to strike it from the agenda at this point, unless there is an objection.
Okay.
Is there an objection for that item? Just let me, I just want to know if this is germane to that or not.
Sort of.
Okay, Dr. Luck, go ahead.
What I was going to suggest is that as a substitution, perhaps we could begin the discussion Mr. Lyons has suggested of financial considerations during the lunch. And of course, if we then decide we have to go into executive session, we can do that subsequently, but perhaps replace what we have here with the discussion.
Well, and this is, so first of all, logistically, we are not catering lunch for this particular meeting. Robert sent out an email to that effect. There is stuff locally, so we'll have probably a time to go get lunch or order lunch in, and then we'll do whatever we do. I think just striking it from the agenda frees up
that is fine.
That time.
That is fine, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there any objection to me striking that from the agenda?
I had one comment
Okay,
that's
go ahead.
relative.
Sure.
I'd like to give notice, though, for that to be on the next agenda, because that's not proper.
No, that's totally proper, and I was actually going to suggest that given that there were some things that were supposed to be carryovers that didn't get carried over or weren't carried over in the way that they should have been, it is probably a good idea at this meeting to start a practice of on Sunday. I will go around the room and double check with people, is there anything that you know you want on the next agenda for sure, and I'll just open up a draft of the next agenda, and then I won't lose anything, and I think everyone will feel more sane and comfortable.
But I wanted to clarify, because I'll have to clarify this with RCV Colorado, is my intention was not just to have a presentation on Faribault, the larger thing. There are specific things going on in Colorado.
Oh, all right.
That's why I guess they're having successes there that would be of interest. So
Okay.
I will get with them.
Me too.
Okay. Mr. Goldstein? You
Yeah, I
were
have
waiting
two
patiently.
things. I would strike the 15 minutes for candidates for committees in the agenda because we have not met since the last meeting, not having any business conduct. Or you want me to say that during my 15 minutes?
So it would be my preference to leave all of the committees on the agenda so that for those committees that have, for whatever reason, not met or met sporadically or not produced reports, the body at least, we have something on the agenda to look at that and decide, is that good or bad or others?
Okay, then I've got one other thing that I might need some guidance on. Within the text of the Convention Oversight Committee report will be a set of recommendations for presidential candidates to be included both on the convention website and on the LP's website. And we discussed this, we kind of batted it back and forth, and I would like to know if a motion to propose that ought to arise out of the Convention Committee report, or is a separate item without previous notice?
I would suggest that you take it up during the convention committee's report's time. Motions are proper during your report.
Okay.
And do you anticipate that you will need more than the 15 minutes that's otherwise allocated?
With all the other stuff that is in the COC report, absolutely. I would at least expand it to 30 minutes.
Mr. Longstreth, is this related to that?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So the first agenda item with previous notice was me dealing with presidential debate media on the LP website, and
Okay.
it sounds like the convention committee is going to take that up during their time,
No,
and I can.
that's a separate thing.
Separate thing.
I just want to make sure that there's not an overlap there.
Is there objection to expanding the convention oversight committee to 30 minutes? Understanding the thing right after it might take a lot less than 15. Hearing no objection. Other changes or corrections to the agenda? Ms. Harlow?
I would like to add, normally during my report, I'd be putting forth the minutes from last meeting. Ms. Mattson had some additional suggestions that I have not incorporated, and I will have that out to everybody today. They were somewhat minor, but I don't have them done yet. So I'd like to put that as a separate agenda item tomorrow.
Is there any objection to adding 10 minutes to the agenda for approval of the previous minutes in new business without previous notice after the timing of elections? Ms. Mattson?
So, I won't object to putting it on the agenda, I guess, but in terms of the time it takes to review a new version of a set of minutes, I'm not sure.
We can't hear you. We're getting old over here.
Yeah, in terms of how long it takes to review a fresh version of the minutes, I'm not sure that overnight is enough for me to review the list of changes that have been requested and do that. So I'm not, if it's going to come out at midnight and we're supposed to vote tomorrow, that's not going to be adequate for me.
So is that an objection to placing it on the agenda? Because otherwise we're going to, if we want to consider it, it's going to be a suspension of the rules to amend the agenda at that point. I don't have a strong preference either way. I was just trying to. Or basically, would you like to object to putting it on, or would you like to object to consideration?
Yeah, just kick it to an email ballot. Just kick it to an email ballot.
So there's an objection to adding it to the agenda, so I'm not going to add it to the agenda. You can make the motion to suspend the
Tomorrow,
rules
if everyone's
Yep,
happy.
basically. Mr. Redpath?
Are we at 3 additions now to new business with previous notice? I just caught 2, but I think we're at 3.
So we have the policy manual style review for 10, functional allocation of expenses for 10, timing of the elections for credentials, bylaws, and platform for 10. Those are the 3 I have there. We have the site of the November meeting for 10 minutes prior to adjournment today. We have the financial future of the party for 30 minutes after staff reports, potentially leading into lunch, because we don't have the lunch thing, and convention oversight expanded to 30 minutes from 15. That is all the changes I have written down. Is there any, are there any other changes people would like?
Without extending time, we can't do it, Mr. Chairman.
I will pretend I don't know the time long enough to ask what Ms. Mattson is seeking to recognize.
So I don't have a motion to modify. I just want to point out from the outset that not all the items that are listed in the with previous notice section actually do have previous notice as defined in the policy manual. So we can deal with that one at a time when we get there, but I'm just giving you a heads up.
I actually think it might be that none of them do, or maybe one.
Mine do, Henchman's does, I'd have to look at the other ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I will trust that those people who submitted them know whether or not they're subject to previous notice or not. I will keep you on my toes.
Just may impact the vote to adopt them. So.
Is there any objection to adopting the agenda as I have described it with the modifications we have made before we ran out of time, just in under the wire? Hearing no objection, the agenda will be adopted.
Mr. Chair, could you email me a copy of that agenda?
Did you not get?
Not the latest one. Is that still the one from
This is the one that I had
Okay.
emailed earlier in the week.
Okay,
and
I got it.
These written
Okay, I
things
got
you
that.
can totally borrow if you'd like.
Okay, no, I got that. I thought you did another one to the list.
No, I did. I specifically did not do another one to the list because I've done that where I've had multiple versions out and they get in the wild
Okay.
and bad things happen. All right. Potential conflicts of interest, 2 minutes. Are there any new or different conflicts of interest?
The current list is in the OneNote. I put in everything everyone sent me so far.
Is anyone aware of any conflicts of interest they want to raise at this time that are not already known? Mr. Lyons?
No longer the Libertarian Party Massachusetts chairman.
Okay, I'll remove that.
Okay. Anything else?
Relieved.
Good cause.
Wow. All right. Hearing none, nothing else, we will next move to chair's report for 15 minutes. I submitted a chair's report in writing. I'm happy to answer any questions about that report. I do want to take some of the time, rather than go into repeating the things that I already wrote down that you all probably read dutifully, to talk a little bit about where I see the party going into the 2020 election cycle. So we have an opportunity, I think, to have a major impact on the 2020 elections. The two old parties appear to be going into a populist death cycle where they just argue over who's the other and who you're supposed to hate and who you're supposed to love and who you trust and who you don't trust. There are a number of issues. Lauren has worked on these campaigns that track double wedge issues that are unlikely to be served by either the Republican or Democratic nominees. At least in the current field, I don't see anybody that's going to address the 3 issues that we profiled at Freedom Fest for people, namely anti-war. There is no anti-war party. Reducing or dealing with the national debt. It should be very obvious from the events this week that neither party cares about that. And free trade and ending tariffs, because tariffs are taxes that Americans pay. And Grover Norquist from Americans from Tax Reform was very happy to get a picture in front of our banner and where it hit the button all around, tweak a lot of the national conservatives who have decided that somehow centrally planned trade policy is a good idea. All previous evidence to the contrary. I think that if we are able to raise the money and put the effort into it, we can expand those campaigns from just issue campaigns that kind of push things into the general consciousness to robust lists of people who have a serious interest in that particular issue. And the nature of those three issues is that they are not going to be addressed by the Republicans and Democrats. And those single issue voters can be in coalition with each other without fighting. Because free traders don't fight with anti-debt people, and anti-debt people don't fight with anti-war people. They all have a synergy together so they don't push other people out of the coalition. That gives us the potential to have negotiating leverage going into post-Austin with the campaign contract with whoever our nominee is, where we will have robust lists of hard voters who take a radical libertarian position on their single issue that we can offer in exchange with the presidential campaign for getting the whole list without restrictions, or at least that being the major deal point for us. We've never had negotiating power at the end of a national convention. It's come up repeatedly in the bylaws, and this would be an opportunity for us to have something of value, because if we can identify, target, and cultivate 5% of the electorate that is really hard anti-war, 5% of the electorate that is hard free trade, and 5% of the electorate that is hard anti-debt, 5 and 5 and 5 make 15 last time I checked. And 15 is kind of an important number when it comes to presidential politics. No nominee has to take these issues, and we're welcome as a party to continue to cultivate those voters on behalf of a nominee if they don't want them. But I think it's an opportunity for us to really position the party to rise above the populism, get into issues of what does the future look like for your kids and your grandkids. All 3 of those issues resonate with this idea of what's the future look like for this country, and get back to a hopeful message for what we want, as opposed to the hateful message of the president's really bad, or the socialists are really bad, or other people are really bad. That's the strategy they're going to take. We shouldn't take that strategy going into 2020. I don't think we can do that at our current scale. We as a party do not have the budget, we do not have the bandwidth, the budget that we passed coming out of 2018, recognize the financial difficulties, and we don't have, at this point, a plan to fix it. But we could. If we expand the development department to approximately 35% of the organization, where we have 3 to 4 people full-time working on raising money, then that takes this party to the next level. And then we can go from there to having a strategic communications director who's handling all of the communications, going down both internal, external, and social. And they all stay on message and build up these campaigns and go out and actually be in the arena. Those are the opportunities that face us if we want to do it. But they will require us to do things we have not done before. They will require us to grow. That growth is going to be painful. It is going to be uncomfortable. And that's what I see going into 2020. That's the vision I have for the party. And I probably have not been doing a good enough job of telling you all it. So that's it. How much time do I have?
You've got 9.5 minutes.
All right. Questions?
The question on that project for the Hospers manuscript, have they been in touch?
They've been in touch. Their deadline is Thanksgiving. I haven't done anything to start writing.
I know you're quick.
Huh?
I know you're really, really quick. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely on the radar, and they have been in touch, so we have communication. Other questions? All right. Well, I want to fill the gap with something, and then I'll get to you, Jeff. I also want to specifically recognize Lauren Doherty for the work at Freedom Fest. She did an excellent job of making sure that our presence there was the best that it's ever been in any of the times I've attended. She did different issue campaigns for all 3 days with banners so that we were able to just talk about the thing we were talking about that day and stay on message. She did a great job of putting together multiple tables at the closing banquet where a lot of good connections were made with people. That kind of networking, that kind of foresight is what Lauren brings to this organization, and it is what we will be losing as she moves on to other things. And I don't... Mr. Hewitt.
You went too long. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah, we were going to adjourn.
Adjourn, yeah.
Does anyone have a second for Mr. Hewitt's
Oh,
motion
I
to
second
adjourn?
that.
I want to see a vote.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn until tomorrow. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? What if it passed? It doesn't pass.
Then we'd have to cram it into one day like the real life did.
Did you have a question, Mr. Hewitt? You were recognized. Did you have a question? Or?
Yeah, so I'd like to address, and you know, you talk about coming up next year here and having our convention, our presidential convention. By that time, you know, it's kind of over with. Anybody that we choose as our nominee, we need to get in a position where we're serious enough, where we have candidates that are out there and have that momentum, and you know, whatever we can do, put that party behind them in an earlier manner, because by the time it gets to this in the election cycle, I think we're kind of behind no matter who we have. And I'd like to see maybe some discussion on moving our convention up or whatever, and generating more excitement going down the stretch. As we get more and more serious candidates that are going to get more and more attention, and every candidate's serious, I don't mean that as a pejorative in any way, but as momentum builds, I really do think that this has to be something that we celebrate, and we bring in, you know, more media, everything else, and people start saying, wow, watch out, you know, this is a serious thing that's going forward. So again, just, I'm getting it out there. I'd like to see that change, be a little bit earlier up, maybe 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it takes. I know this will have to change all of our state, you know, conventions or whatever. A lot of those have it, but it has to start here. And I really think we need that to be competitive with the other two parties.
All right, I have Dr. Lark, Mr. Redpath, and then without objection, Mr. Hayes from the gallery. Dr. Lark.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your report. Thank you also for recognizing Ms. Doherty for her efforts there. In terms of the interviews that you're doing, are you seeing, because I haven't had the chance to hear many of these interviews, a couple I've had the chance to read. Do you see any sort of trend in terms of the nature of how the reporters are addressing you? In the past, sometimes libertarian officials are used basically to frame an issue that the reporter wants framed. And the libertarian is used basically to hit somebody the reporter wants to hit. Are you seeing a change in terms, either talking to the reporters off camera, or just in general with these interviews, are you seeing a change, perhaps more respect for the Libertarian Party and its positions, given you made the 3 very interesting points about these issues where Democrats and Republicans are really horrible and have demonstrated their horribleness?
We are being treated much more seriously than we have in the past cycle, and I only have direct internal knowledge for the last, I think it's 5 years this month. We used to be a foil that, you know, you bring up if you need somebody to say something libertarian to fit the angle of your piece. We were reliable, and that got us some of the hits on news sites that had a serious bias one way or the other. I'm seeing a lot more straight ahead news. The interviews are respectful. They are seeing us as a political player. I will tell you that over the last month, many of the interviews have been related to what the congressman from Grand Rapids is going to do next, because he doesn't like to talk about it. So they come looking for anybody who can give them answers. But that possibility to that specific point, they're taking it very seriously. It's not seen as some sort of fly-by-night kind of thing. They see the electoral map. They know that we're likely to be on all 50 state ballots in the district. And we're getting treated like a grown-up political party, at least at the news level. Mr. Redpath?
I'd like to disagree with what Mr. Hewitt just said, because I'm all for raising the game of the Libertarian Party, but I don't think we should ask too much of our candidates. That is, that if we were to make the presidential election, by the way, of course, I'm an old timer at this point. Many people don't realize that we used to have our presidential conventions on Labor Day weekend of the year before the presidential election. So we'd nominate a presidential ticket, and they'd be our presidential ticket for 14 months. And that means that they'd have to be going to conventions all during that, state conventions, all during that previous year. And what that effectively means is essentially a 2-year or damn close to a 2-year commitment for someone to be a candidate for public office for the presidential ticket, or at least for the people running for president. And that's a pretty darn big ask of anyone. And I think it's a much more reasonable ask to ask for a year of someone's life, as opposed to 2 years of someone's life in that regard. And that the risk on that is going to winnow down the field. The last presidential nominating convention was that year before was Labor Day weekend '91 for the '92 nomination. And I'm not sure we would have gotten our presidential tickets the way we got them, or had the candidates we had, if we'd been asking for 2 years of their lives instead of 1 or less.
If there's no objection, Mr. Hayes?
Yeah, so I'd just like to, and speaking for myself, not as the chair of this Convention Oversight Committee, but as somebody who's very experienced at this point with putting on conventions, paying attention to conventions and how they work 60 hours a week of my life, and what I've seen from my involvement, that point in 2016, we had a Memorial Weekend. And that was a point at which pretty much it was decided and known who was going to be the Democrat nominee and the Republican nominee. And at that point, people were looking for something else, including the media. And that was the sweet spot when our members the kids were getting out of school and they had some vacation time and they could be there. And if you look at 2016, I think that speaks for itself. That was a very exciting time. There was a lot of excitement in the room. That was political central for the Libertarian Party and the world to a lot of extent. A lot of people were looking at us at that point. And I think that's the sweet spot for us at the present time where the organization is. Now, as we grow, things could change, but I still think that convention is before the Republicans and Democrats put a ring on it and make it official with their nominees. So we are ahead of them. But reiterating what Mr. Redpath said, asking 2 years of someone's life where they have to be out there hammering it, that's a lot to ask for our members where we're at right now. So I think just the best thing, now look, we have candidates that are getting out there and campaigning before internally, but doing that would be kind of an external thing. And do we have the resources to maintain that level of exposure and commitment out there to spend that kind of money? We don't have that much money, and so we need to keep it compacted there to where we can have the most impact when people are looking at us.
Time is up on this agenda item, Mr. Chairman.
I did have, who was seeking to be recognized? I have Hewitt and Phillips. Is there any objection to recognizing Hewitt and Phillips?
I'll move to extend for 5 minutes.
Is there any objection to that? Hearing no objection. Mr. Phillips and then Mr. Hewitt.
As Mr. Hayes so correctly pointed out, candidates are already giving 2 years. I might have some personal knowledge on that. And should be. I understand the asking, the demand, but we should be giving because guess what? That's what our opponents are doing. Our campaign is not just reaching out to the conventions. We're doing plenty of that. But we're also, Kim was on Judge Knapp. We're spending a lot of time reaching out to Democrats and Republicans as well. And that's the kind of time we need to be spending. Now, whether we need to move the convention or not, that might be a different story. But as we get more and more recognized, and if we become recognized officially as a party in the country, we're going to be primarying them anyway. So it's something we need to think ahead for.
Mr. Hewitt?
I spent a year, every minute of that year, getting the office that I got. The office that I have isn't anything near the presidency. If we want these, and I'll tell you what, once you're in office, any given day when you're in a high-level office is everything you've got. If you're not willing to put a year and a half or 2 years into going for this, you're never going to be in it. We can sit by the sidelines forever if you want. But if this party wants to get serious, and I really applaud what Mr. Phillips and Ms. Ruff are doing, getting out there early, getting their name out. But when we have an earlier convention and we go ahead and anoint the person that we're standing behind, whoever it is, then I think it really adds a lot. And that gets us news media, everything else. And we do that earlier than later. Because let me show you why when Gary Johnson threw his hat in to be senator all of a sudden, he didn't have a chance because of his timing. Maybe had he done that earlier and gotten more fundraising, he did have name recognition, and he might have had a chance for that. But timing is everything. We have to be serious if we're going to do this. And it takes a hell of a lot of sweat and a hell of a lot of time. So that's the reason why I know it's a lot. It's a lot for Robert and Daniel and the rest of the crew. But making those changes, I think, will change a lot. And we've got to start thinking now. I want to see a libertarian in high offices all over this country while I'm still alive. And that's the only way we're going to do it. I'm telling you, it is a lot of hard work, whether you're running for city council, school board, or anything else. You have to be committed. And we can't just say it's a part-time gig or something. So that's my issue on that, and I hope other people consider it.
Is there any objection to hearing from Ms. Adams? Go ahead, Ms. Adams.
So in 2016, I had an incredibly large region for the Johnson Weld campaign, 18 states. Daniel's right, there was a lot of excitement coming out of that convention. But the one thing that I heard more than anything else from non-libertarians is if Gary Johnson is serious, why did he wait so late to throw his hat in the ring? We know he didn't wait late, but the general public doesn't know that because they're not watching our convention. To them, we feel like latecomers to the party. They feel like we showed up and we didn't bring enough booze to share. That's how they feel, and it hurts us when it comes to the ballots. It just does.
Is Is there anyone else seeking to be recognized on this item? Seeing none, the next item is Vice Chair's report. Mr. Merced, go ahead.
Okay, the report is in the minutes, or in the OneNote, so that way people can review it. So I'll take some questions in a moment. But the one thing I want to say, after going to 10 state conventions, going to 12 events in 12 states, I want to say how exciting and how enthusiastic I am about the future, going from state to state, seeing new faces, people who are going to their first Libertarian Party state convention, seeing people who just got involved with the party, running for officers in their state or in their county, people who are looking to become candidates, thinking more than ever about all those strategic decisions regarding how they're going to manage their data, who's going to be their campaign manager, all this stuff. Seeing a lot more sort of serious, exciting, enthusiastic activity. So I just want to say the future's bright, and I'm excited. So leave it at that. If anyone has any questions regarding any of the contents of the report.
Mr. Hewitt, and then Mr. Phillips.
Which was your favorite state convention?
They're all my favorite.
State conventions are like my kids.
I don't have a question. I have been to many of these with Alex, and I would like to take a minute to recognize what an amazing job he does working each one of these conventions and working with people at these conventions and building that excitement that he's talking about.
That's a lot of years.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right. Next item would be the Treasurer's report. Mr. Hagan.
All right, Ed sent out the June end of month financial reports. I'd say money's still tight because our reserve is at $22,872, and that number includes about $86,500 net of deferred convention revenue. And one thing I would like to point out, under the assets, the staff has been basically kind of squirreling away some part of the convention revenues into the restricted funds account. So be less inclined to use that money for other stuff. So be there available for when the convention bill does become due. So far, they've set aside $45,000 in the restricted funds account. And there ain't questions.
If there's no objection, Mr. Hayes.
$45,000 in the convention, reserve convention fund out of how much raised?
86.
Oh,
No.
well, they've raised $94,234 from package sales, welcoming committee, and suites. We've done prepaid expenses of $7,674, and we've had other revenue associated with the convention. It's about almost $30,000. That includes $24,000 from the convention theme, which we book under general donation since it's not tied to like a package or something. We have to give to the people who donate for that.
Ms. Matson.
Okay, that segues directly into what I wanted to ask about is questions about how things are being booked for convention revenues. Because, all right, so I was looking at the June financials, so as of June 30th, and we had an update on convention sales as of June 15th, so middle of that month, and at that point we'd sold 87,000 of packages, 4,000 of add-ons, so that's 91, and a 24,000 theme contest, so that gives us a total of 115, but there's only 81,000 the deferred convention revenues list. So you just mentioned the theme contest.
That gets booked under general donations, not under the convention.
So I guess I want to raise the question of whether that's the correct handling. I know we do that. We do fundraising on, here's a subject that's one of many things that we do, like ballot access, please donate to the party, and that, that's just a general donation to the party. It's not treated as, restricted or dedicated for any particular purpose. But for the theme contest, the emails that went out, we specifically told our donors these will be used to offset convention costs. And it seems to me that those ought to be treated as deferred convention revenues, because it's one way that we're not setting the package prices not quite as high as what it takes to really recover the costs. And so my question is whether those ought to be booked as deferred convention revenues instead of.
There's a liability, deferred revenue is a liability.
Yeah, it's a liability, but, you know, since we specifically told the donors it will be used for convention expenses. And, so I guess I want to raise that question as to what is the proper treatment of that.
Mr. Hagan, do you want to address that, or?
I address the reason we put it under the general donation staff of convention is because unlike packages where the donors are expecting something in return, like packages, they know they're getting the, say the banquet and the speakers during the convention, something we have to give to them. We see these as more just general donations that we don't necessarily have to give something to them, so we book them right away as a donation to the party.
So do you treat it the same way when they buy a package and it says, I want to add on $20 to offset AV costs? Where does that go? Does that go in deferred convention revenues, or does it go like the theme contest? Because they're not buying something, but it's a specific donation to the convention event.
Yeah, I believe those were also went under general donation, didn't they, Robert? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, at minimum, you know, that I think there's very little arguable about those, that those ought to go to convention revenues. It's a donation to the convention.
All right, I'm going to go to, I have on deck Mr. Redpath, Ms. Doherty without objection, Mr. Kraus without objection, and then Ms. Adams without objection. Mr. Redpath.
You speak of segregation. There's segregation, is it in a separate bank account or is it in a separate general ledger account? What
separate bank account.
Separate bank account.
Yeah,
so it is physically segregated, so it's in a separate account that isn't going to be touched except for convention expenses.
It's a separate bank account for all of the restricted, so it'd be for convention and
that's the restricted
building,
equity
and the
accounts
building
also.
fund.
Building and I think campus outreach
Legal
is
defense
sometimes
and
restricted
campus.
as well.
Right.
Okay.
It's called a lockbox.
Those three temporarily restricted equity accounts.
Okay, and then within that, do you know how much is for what?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's in the finance report. It's also for
Ms.
those
Doherty.
others.
I agree with Ms. Magnuson. We need to consider the money that has been raised for the convention, whether it's theme contest, et cetera, as convention money. That is what the donors think is happening, and that is, and we need to respect that. There were a lot of numbers thrown around a few minutes ago. It got kind of confusing what means what and where and so on. The summary of that is when you add the two different categories, so the convention revenue plus the convention fundraising, and you subtract out the money that's been set aside in this other bank account, we have used approximately $85,000 of convention money to pay overhead in the last several months. That is the number you need to know. We have spent $85,000 of convention funds if you combine these two different categories.
Mr. Kraus, did you still have something?
Sure. I can just cover a couple of things. First of all, in answer to Bill's question again, we have two separate restricted accounts. One is a FEC restricted account at our BB&T Bank for the building fund. All the legal, certain funds, if we have to keep completely separate, where we're raising the above limit amounts for. And so the building fund is really our only true separate fund at the moment. If we ever get a huge...
Until we win that Supreme Court case.
Yeah, let's win the Supreme Court case, then it won't matter. But until then, that's really our only separate account. And then we have another restricted account, temporary restricted account at PNC Bank, separate bank account, and that's currently where we're housing the LEGO and the convention and the little bit that's left in education. So those are in the PNC Bank account at the moment.
May I have a question about the building fund?
Sure.
Do we make mortgage payments out of that?
No, not this time.
Okay, so we do
But
not.
we could.
We could, but we don't make mortgage. So that building fund account, bank account, is for making prepayments on the mortgage.
Prepayments and other like maintenance or special expenses.
How much is in there?
Capital expenses. At the end of June, we had 5,000 and yeah, 51,000 2,100. Currently, we have about 3,000 because we're paying for a new compressor out of that account. We have paid 27.
Okay, so that's the reason there's cash in there right now, is that we got a $4,000 expense coming up and we want to use it for that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the restricted versus unrestricted type of convention funds, fundraising versus packaging, we've gone over this with the auditor multiple times over the last several years. About 3 or 4 years ago when we started doing fundraising, quote unquote, for the convention, prior to the convention, such as the theme contest, he determined that that must be recognized immediately, meaning it goes on our income statement and it can be used immediately as general funds, that it should not be restricted and it should not show on the balance sheet. And that's separate because there's not a specific package or a liability, a promise related to those funds. For example, if the convention, let's say this building burnt down tomorrow after our meeting, and we could no longer hold our convention here and we couldn't find a suitable location for 2020, we are legally obligated to return those package money to the donors. We are not under any legal or audit or financial or GAAP obligation to return a theme contest money to those donors. So that's kind of what ultimately determines, from an accounting perspective, what we recognize immediately as revenue and what gets deferred as revenue and how it gets classified in our financial. We're required by the bylaws to follow GAAP. Our auditor determines whether we're following GAAP. He says in the audit that we are, that we're doing our accounting correctly. And this was something originally when we first started doing this that I was restricting and putting on the balance sheet and not recognizing right away and not using right away. And the auditor said, bad boy, no, wrong, can't do that. You have to, this isn't related to the event that's happening in the future in terms of a restricted promise to a donor.
Okay. So I have next, without objection, Ms. Adams, and then Mr. Hayes, I think, was seeking to be recognized, and that would also be without objection. Then coming back to Ms. Doherty, and without objection, and Ms. Mattson. Ms. Adams.
So 2 things. First, to speak to what Robert just said, just because we can do something absolutely does not mean it is ethical or that we should, number 1. Number 2, to get back to what Mr. Hagan was saying about this fundraising for the theme contest, we didn't promise people anything, it doesn't go toward anything. That's absolutely not true. We told our members, we told the body, this is going to offset your cost for convention. We absolutely did make a promise to them. We did promise them a return. Whether that's a physical, tangible return, or it's just a lower ticket price, we did promise them a return, and we've reneged on that. And no auditor saying that that's okay makes that okay. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
Ms. Doherty, or sorry, Mr. Hayes.
So, speaking as a donor to the convention, as a person that largely for the Convention Oversight Committee made promises to people that we were using this money to help offset the cost of the convention. That's the whole purpose of us doing the theme contest. Why would we spend so much of our time for this for it to not do that? Now look, I understand this party has some financial issues. If we have to close the office and close down and we don't make it to convention, then we have a really big problem. So I am okay, sort of, kind of, a little bit, with using the money to stay afloat, but to not acknowledge it in any way as being part of the convention and owed to the convention, that's a problem. And as a donor, and if you look at the FEC filings to see how much I've put into this convention, because most of what I've done this year is, and some of it last year was for this convention, it makes me upset, and the party could not afford to pay me back. So, you know, just, we need to at least acknowledge it. You know, I understand GAAP and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. Okay, we got to follow those sort of regulations and rules, but we need to acknowledge that this money was for the convention.
All right. I have Ms. Doherty without objection, Ms. Mattson, Mr. Nana without objection, Mr. Fishman, and then Mr. Molman without objection, which, go ahead, Ms. Doherty.
I agree very much with Daniel and Aaron. Additionally, this is part of how we got ourselves in the financial bind we were in several months ago. which I, more than anybody else in this room, had to work very, very, very hard to pull us out of that financial hole. We ended up in that financial hole because we spent convention money on ballot access, which is very important, and we were all glad to be able to do what needed to be done. But we can't keep doing this because we're going to end up in this same financial hole in a year that we had several months ago. And I'm not going to be here next time to help fix it. You guys do not want that situation again. We must fix it now.
Time, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any objection to extending for 5 minutes? Hearing no objection, Ms. Mattson.
So in terms of whether there's an obligation that, you know, a liability that's incurred for those theme contest funds, sure, there's not, I can't point to this particular package where we have to we might have to refund. However, we need those funds in addition to the combination of all the package revenue combined to pay the bills. That's the point. We're able to reduce package costs because we have these other funds, and so the liabilities that are incurred by the sales of the packages need the theme contest money to go with it. So it's a combined liability. So I think there absolutely is an obligation that we have, and I'm inclined to make a motion, and I'm okay if you want to divide it into two pieces, but I guess I will make a motion to direct staff to fully account for deferred convention revenues in our financial reporting, including all sales, add-on donations, which we were just told were not being handled this way, and the theme contest.
Second.
Objection.
Hold on. Slow down. It's been moved and seconded to direct the staff to report all of the convention revenues as dedicated to the convention. Is that am I understanding the motion?
It's deferred convention
As
revenues.
deferred convention revenues.
Email that language to
There
the secretary.
is an objection from Mr. Bishop Henchman. Is an objection that this would be out of order?
I can start there. It's both
Okay,
out of
go
order
ahead.
and on the merits.
Well, let me hear the out of order objection because that's going to determine where we go from here.
Well, Ms. Mattson has an item under new business with previous notice, two items under new business with previous notice, and I think it's better handled in that section rather than now.
Okay,
And
so
those are
I
different
think this
motions.
All right, so there was an objection that this may be an agenda item that's farther down and we're getting to it out of order. Ms. Mattson indicates that her agenda items for tomorrow or later today or tomorrow when we get to them are not the same motion. So I won't find that it's out of order for that reason. I have to ask Ms. Mattson, is this intended to direct staff to create a report that says, that totals up those things so that the LNC can see it, that would not be directing staff to do anything that would conflict with what the auditor has said we have to do to meet with GAAP? Because while I understand your difference of opinion with the auditor about what is and isn't a liability, I'm just asking if you're directing staff to change our financial reporting that would be audited in a way that would conflict with the auditor's direction. And I don't think you are if you want to keep going.
So I think the language of my motion says to account for those things in the deferred convention revenues, because that's how we track it.
Then that is out of order, because that would be a direction to staff to do something contrary to what the auditor has directed us to do, which is required. We have to follow GAAP by the bylaws. So if you can modify your motion to not direct the staff to do something that's going to conflict with GAAP, that would be a proper motion.
Okay, I disagree that it conflicts with GAAP, because the whole issue is whether or not there's an underlying liability that goes with it, and
Yes.
I believe that there is.
I am aware that you disagree.
Would you like to suggest alternate wording that will accomplish what I'm aiming to do?
Yeah, Mr.
Miss.
Mr. Chair, as a point of
Whoa,
information.
whoa. Time. Sorry. It's only 10:05 and we're already into one of these moments. Time, we have 1 minute left.
Okay, let's divide this into two pieces, because I think there's one part that you think is out of order. So it's certainly the add-on donations when people buy a package, and and they say, I want to contribute extra money to pay for AV at the convention or printing costs at the convention, those ought to go in deferred convention revenue. So if you want to split this up and we can deal with the theme contest separately, then I think that gets around your concern with the auditor.
Objection.
Please, Mr. Bishop Henchman, if you can quickly explain what your objection is.
We're being very loose about cash, budget, and ledger. Those are three completely different concepts, and we're really intermixing them in this discussion. I'm unclear on which of those Ms. Mattson is talking about. Because if we're doing anything on this with regards to the ledger, we're going to get into audit trouble, as the chairman has indicated. If you want to provide kind of information for the committee and for staff about how to better manage cash, I think, you know, we could go in that direction.
That's in
and it would
order.
probably be helpful. And budget, of course, we have complete control over our budget. So if we want to cut our non-convention expenses by $40,000 in order to set aside another $40,000 for the convention, then let's entertain that motion. But right now, I'm not really sure what we're talking about, and there's a real serious danger that your motion is instructing staff to defy what the auditors have instructed them to do.
I think that
So,
Point of information.
yes,
With regard to the auditor, what I heard Robert Cross say is that the auditor says we're doing it correctly. I didn't hear him say that the auditor says we have to do it this way. So what I need to know is the interpretation here, or should it be, that the auditor is saying that the way we're doing it is acceptable, not that the auditor is telling us we have to do it this way?
so I believe I can answer this question. I will try, and Robert, if I answer this wrong, please do correct me. The auditor's opinion of what is a liability depends on there being an identifiable person who has an identifiable claim against a particular amount of funds. And that's why the auditor says that if there's a theme contest and you can't have a person who says, you owe me this, I have a claim against you for this. If it's a moral obligation for us to spend the money like we said we would, the auditor says that does not go on deferred. It does not go in deferred because there's no it gets into legal stuff.
Yes.
If you can't find the person that you got to pay back, it doesn't go in that column.
So that's my question. I understand what's being said here. My question is, does that also mean we cannot put it there if we choose to?
Robert, can you answer that? Because I don't know that.
So again, I was doing it the other way previously, and he said, no, that's the wrong way, bad boy, you have to do it this way. So I hope that answers your question. In terms of what Ms. Manson's asking, as she knows, I provide a report to the convention committee almost weekly, and I'd be more than happy to include that in my financials showing all the totals that the convention committee has raised through various means, whether fundraising or otherwise, and what we've set aside, and then the balance, the difference, so you all kind of know where we stand financially. I don't need any kind of directive to do that. I already provide it. I'm perfectly willing to add it to my monthly financials for Tim to share.
Okay, we've run out of time. Is there a motion to extend?
So moved.
How long?
5 minutes.
There's a motion to extend for 5 minutes. Is there objection?
Objection.
There is objection. All in favor of extending for 5 minutes, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Opposed? To 2. We will be extended for 5 minutes. So we can try and get through this insomuch as that motion is going to direct a change in the actual financial reporting, the ledger, as Mr. Bishop Henchman said. It is out of order, and that is my ruling. We can appeal that, or we can modify the motion. Ms. Mattson, what would you like to do?
Is it out of order just because of the theme contest portion of it? If it were just for the add-on donations, would the chair say that's out of order?
I would, because those don't have an articulable claim. A member cannot come to, no, let me just explain it so that you know why I'm saying it. A member cannot come to you, even Daniel Hayes cannot come to us and say, you didn't spend this $5,000 on deferring expenses, you owe me the $5,000 back. There is not a legal claim there that is direct because it's not a thing that is owed. And so, to the extent the auditor says that that doesn't go in that column, we can't direct the staff to do something that would conflict with the auditor, which would conflict with the bylaws, which require us to be under GAAP. That's my ruling. So, did that answer the question? Tell me how you'd like to proceed.
Okay, so I think there is a claim, because if they said, I donated for AV for the convention, you didn't have a convention, it got canceled, I want my money back. And we know exactly who gave us that money. So I don't see that it's that big of a difference between that and the packages, so.
I understand that you disagree. I'm asking how you would like to proceed.
All right, so I guess I'll make all right, I'm gonna stick with my motion. I'll appeal the ruling of the chair on the motion.
Okay, there's been an appeal from the ruling of the chair. I think I've spoken to my ruling. Point of order or information?
Point of asking Ms. Mattson for the original wording of
I
her
emailed it to you a few minutes ago.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do you need to speak further to your appeal from the ruling of the chair? Would anyone else like to be heard on appeal from the ruling of the chair? I have Ms. Harlos, go ahead.
I'm in complete support of Ms. Mattson. I think I think her point is well taken. And I'm not entirely confident, with all due respect to because with everyone, that perhaps it was explained to the auditor correctly, because I do not see how the auditor would say that. Because Ms. Mattson's point of if we didn't have a convention, and I'm thinking of even with the historical committee, does this mean when somebody gives me $50 for the historical committee, it doesn't have to go to that? I'm sorry, that just seems really unethical to me.
I have Mr. Bishop Henchman, I have Mr. Merced, Mr. Lyons, and Mr. Fishman, and Mr. Nicola, and Ms. Doherty. On the appeal from the ruling of the chair, I just want to make sure everyone who's seeking to be recognized now is on that appeal.
And, I mean, we're putting aside the question of whether 100% is the right percentage.
Well, but this is on the appeal.
Yeah.
So Mr. Bishop Henchman, go ahead.
You know, because everything has overhead. We can argue about what the right amount of overhead is. Anyways, Mr. Kraus and the chair have correctly described what GAAP directs us to do. I think there's a couple options that what we can do. We can ask for better cash accounting from Robert, so we all know what the ongoing numbers are as were provided here. We could ask for a change to the budget, but we would need specifics on that. But what Ms. Mattson has proposed conflicts with the bylaws because it directs us to defy GAAP. Ms. Mattson, whether she's right or wrong, is an issue with the Accounting Standards Board, not with this body.
Okay. On the appeal from the ruling of the chair, Mr. Merced, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I agree with Joe. We should go with what the auditor says. Doesn't mean there isn't a solution though. So I support the ruling of the chair, but I mean, you could in the future, for the funds that have already been spent, we can visit the budget. And then for the funds that are coming in, you can structure those as packages, so that way there is a legal obligation to them for additional funds. You can structure it in a way so that way you follow GAAP.
I think that's wrong about a whole bunch of stuff.
Mr. Lyons.
This is a point of inquiry. Are we still talking about the treasurer's report and how he reports this money to us?
Yeah.
Because we're still on that item. So I appreciate how the money is supposed to be spent ethically, how we solicit it and say we're going to spend it, but is that not a separate item from the treasurer's report?
It's on the financial report.
It is related to the treasurer's report, so the topic is in order. Right now, we're just on whether or not the motion as stated is in order. Mr. Nicola.
So my understanding of what the auditor wants is to understand our liabilities and counterparty risk. If, for whatever reason, we are legally obligated to return funds back to the donors for those specific packages. That's my understanding, and I find that if Robert is willing to give us numbers as to what we've taken in and what convention we're bringing in and what we owe and all that, I think that should satisfy our needs for keeping track of those numbers, personally.
Time, Mr. Chairman.
We're out of time. Is there a motion to extend?
Call the question.
Hearing no motion to extend, we will resolve the previous question. So we'll start on the appeal from the ruling of the chair. Always get it backwards.
Yes.
Yes, sustained.
Yes, sustains. No.
It's overturned.
It overturns. So All in favor of sustaining the ruling? Is there any request for this to be roll call?
I have a question. The ruling of the chair was that the motion was out of order. Is that what?
Correct.
Okay.
Because of the conflict with
Yeah.
the bylaws, or my perceived conflict with the bylaws. There was a request to have it be roll call. If you're ready, Ms. Carlos?
And we go in alphabetical order like we were last time.
Sure.
Ms. Billiard?
I want to restate it just so everybody,
Oh, sorry.
because there were a couple of
You
points.
asked if I was ready.
I know.
I'm ready.
A yes vote sustains the ruling of the chair that the motion's out of order. A no vote overturns the ruling of the chair and would allow the motion to be considered.
As written.
As written.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop Henson?
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Yusuf Pass?
Yes.
Mr. Hagan?
Yes.
And I am going to vote yes, no, excuse me, I got confused on my own thing. 1 second. Mr. Hewitt?
No.
Dr. Lark?
Aye.
Mr. Longstreth?
No.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes.
Ms. Mattson?
No.
Mr. Merced?
Yes.
Mr. Nikela?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Redpath?
Maybe. I'll vote yes.
Mr. Smith?
No.
Ms. Van Horn?
Yes.
We are yeses 9, noes
Wait.
5, 10 to 5. Would the chair like to vote?
No, thank you.
Yeah, you do too.
Oh, sorry,
yes.
duh. Okay,
yes.
thank you. So then
No,
it's
I'm
11
waiting
to
to
5.
me.
Okay, thank you.
Nick, did you vote?
I did not vote. I chose not to. The ruling of the chair is upheld. The motion is out of order. There are no other pending items in that treasurer's report. We are out of time. We're going to move to the next thing without a motion to either extend or to suspend the rules.
I'm sorry, are we done voting here?
Yes.
Okay, I would move to extend 3 minutes. I have a question about the treasurer's report generally, and so I would like to move to extend for 3 minutes.
Is there objection to extending for 3 minutes? Hearing no objection, amazingly enough, Mr. Redpath, go ahead, ask.
I just wanted to ask, does the treasurer's reports, I wanted to ask the committee, and I've not spoken privately, and I apologize with Robert and the treasurer, for maybe I should have spoken to them privately about this beforehand, but I'm just going to decide to ask the committee right now. Do the treasurer's reports, the financial reports coming out of the office monthly, do they ring your chimes? I mean, and by that I mean that
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
it's a fire hose of information coming at you. I mean, the way the reports are currently structured. And I'm a licensed CPA in Virginia. You know, if you don't believe me, go to the Virginia Board of Accountancy website. It just seems to me that our reports, I would like, and I'm willing to work with the treasurer and Robert, and if everybody's okay with them, fine. But I would like, to a certain extent, less is more sometimes. And it just strikes me that we get a 16-page report, and it's just a blast of information that perhaps would be more effective if tailored differently. And because I look at these reports, I'm going, what's going on here? And it's difficult sometimes for me to even understand. And the way the report is structured. And I just wanted to get feedback from people. Are you satisfied with the treasurer's reports as they are, or would you like to see something different yourself?
I would like to see something different. I'm so glad you said that.
It's just
I'm
a
not a
fire
CPA,
hose
but I've thought for a long time
it's just a
confusing
fire
as
hose
hell.
of information. It's like, oh my, you just feel drenched with data. And I volunteered to work with the treasurer and Robert, but I'd like to see something that is more digestible and trimmed down a bit.
A written breakdown would be nice.
What? Ms. Billiou, Ms.
Not
Mattson.
necessarily that.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I think that for most people, something more digestible, maybe a synopsis of the financial position is more appropriate. However, if all of this other stuff weren't there, I'd ask for it.
Correct.
So to me, it's not an either or. It's maybe in addition to something that's more appropriate for the average person.
Ms. Mattson.
So I'm not sure that this is on the topic for which he extended time. I want to ask about a path forward to resolve, the matter that just had an appeal. Could possibly the COC members have a discussion with the audit committee and maybe the auditor? Hook us together for a discussion of why this doesn't fall under the matching principle of those revenues don't get recognized. So is there a path forward on that? And that, again, I think it's a different subject from.
I have very much heard what people are saying here, and it was my intent that the staff will work together to resolve these issues. I agree very strongly that the idea of segregated funds must be maintained. Specifically, I go out and ask people for money for certain things. To that end, I would point out that there are occasions where I ask people, will you sponsor the AV package? Should I have 3 people come in that give me more money than actually would cover the AV package, I am not inclined to say that money has to be spent on AV to get me extra special cameras or anything like that. So I think that there is a possibility for us to work together to find a conclusion. It is my fervent intent, if you will give me the opportunity in the next week, to work with you all to reach some conclusion that will achieve our goals.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're out of 3 minutes. All right, next item on the agenda is the secretary's report. Ms. Harless.
I note on here that I have that motion, which I'm not going to offer at this time, and I'll deal with that tomorrow. I just had several things to add. Go here to my notes. First of all, there were the winners for the error finding, and I believe that was Dr. Lark and Mr. Hagan. So I've got my little gifts for no chia pets this time.
Thank you.
And also, I'm going to pass around this little bag here, because I like bringing goodies, so I have these little Statue of Liberty little tokens for when you go to visit. I had a bag full of them, so if you'd like one, please pick one out of the bag and send it back around to me. But here is your gift. And I really appreciate all the careful proofreading. After we decide what we're doing later on with the platform timing, I need to send out the official notification to the party chairs that qualify for seats for platform and credentials, though most of them know it already, and some have already wrote me to tell me who their people are going to be. I wanted to talk about OneNote for a second. I always try to improve it each time. I don't know if everyone noticed that another item I added at the very bottom called Big Page of Reports, where all the links to Word versions where appropriate are there. If you want to download them really quickly and print out a big thing for yourself like some people do.
Yes, Madam Secretary. If I may, since you want suggestions for
Yes.
improvement, under reference materials, I don't see you're including policy manual.
I usually do. That is an error on my part. I'll get that up there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the only ones that will not get Word copies on the Big Page reports is like the council's report, because understandably, legal stuff, they don't like sending Word. He sent me a Word copy just to put into the minutes, but I won't be making that publicly available. Let's see if there's any other notes I had here. And on that vein, to everyone else, if you could please send me Word versions of your reports. If you're uncomfortable having that publicly, just please send it to me privately. And lastly, I don't think I did this by the last time, but I passed the initial NAP test. So I'm an acolyte in the priesthood right now, I guess. And I'm working on going towards the next level. The sickness has infected me and I sort of love it. So if there's any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Mr. Nikela, then Ms. Matson.
What is the deadline for state chairs to submit the platform committee members?
It's not till next year. I believe it's the end of February, but let you know that.
Ms. Mattson?
I haven't fully reviewed the secretary's report. I'm in the middle of a very intense petition drive, and so my time has been spread pretty thin. But I did notice on just initial skim in the secretary's report, it lists on the convention voting process committee that Kevin Moore was elected to that. And there's, again, the situation that we had in the minutes with 10 people elected, or listed as elected, but there were only 9, and Kevin Moore was elected to the other committee.
Okay, I'll take a look at that, thank you. Chuck Moulton sent me some suggestions as well, so I perhaps will send out a revised one overnight, but I appreciate that.
Other questions, people seeking to be recognized?
Now, just one other thing to add, I really wanted to thank Mr. Hagan for helping me with that policy manual review. That was quite extensive, and even though he's not here, Mr. Seebeck from Colorado, who is fantastic at that kind of work.
Okay. Anything else? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Harlos. And orders of the day would have us taking a recess for 10 minutes. So we will be in recess until
Mr. Chairman, is a recess necessary? People want to recess it? Yep, they do.
Yes.
We will be in recess. I'm going to give you 10:37. We will be back. Got an extra minute because I watched an update.
Alicia?
The Libertarian National Convention will be here May 21st through 25th in 2020 in Austin, Texas, at the JW Marriott Austin.
Usually sending directly to my Gmail account. And it didn't have Hypermail yet either.
Okay, it did go to LP. It went to your LP.org address. I'll forward it to your other email.
Okay. Because I even looked on Hypermail and it wasn't there yet.
I'll forward it to your Gmail.
Thank you.
What?
Oh, because I forgot my stamp. Same day Yeah, that's what I'm doing on break right now. Well, actually, not that much. Okay. It's a crash back. I got it good. It was, we had all those times.
Luckily, as of the 31st, I should
Really do this. I cannot.
4 days to go.
I'm going to push hard to get it.
Oh, yeah, that's what I got it all kinds of things.
Daniel's been good so far, so give him a week, we'll see what he comes up with. So, yeah, you got my back 100%.
Yeah, but we're late.
I just called the match.
I got a box up. I got talked into it. She brought an SUV. But I've got it
Until then, so we don't put the rounds
So, scrambled. It says an SUV goal. I don't really know what that means yet.
It's just not my quicker. It's not. This is how we prevent things.
You know, I've got an extra bed if you wanted to stay here. Okay, I'm just, well, just letting you know.
No, I appreciate it, but I also have a car, so I don't know where I live. We think parking here is ridiculous. Are you all by yourself then?
Yeah.
We get started in New York, LA, DC. My theoretical office. I tried to get
see how slow the email is.
So the Gmail one beat out the other one.
Because there's been plenty of times someone will like PM me going, oh, I just sent over something for you to look at. I'm like,
Right. Who wants to spend time analyzing everything?
what?
Who wants to spend time analyzing everything? Make sure it's not spent.
Because like directing everything, like
We're gonna book an Airbnb like.
Do you want to come? Because I'm trying to order this and I'm like,
I like that.
I was a producer for
oh really? Did you want to get?
I tend to write more. My tendency is to write more about something. Try to find something.
Yeah. So how much would it be? A piece?
Yeah, I try to. It's not the best negotiating subject. As long as they stop I try to take away.
This is the area.
Militarize it. I mean, there is
It gets so expensive if it's personal. I definitely consider the atmosphere itself.
I'm just thinking like or like New York.
110 East, yeah. And I can use it for something else too, since I've got one already.
I mean, like today. I don't know your baseline.
Oh, I might not be able to get it today because it was going by my current.
It's nice enough that I want to see outside.
So we'll have to see.
Sometimes it's shut down. Please don't. I'm gonna go to breakfast. Do you want to hang out later or we'll be around?
Yeah. Because I hit one click and I have to change everything because of my password.
Well, I come in, I started off, it's not that hard to get to. Probably was.
Yeah, they don't think they can.
communication with the auditor?
Oh, yeah.
And, just make sure he has the correct information.
Then I'm probably just gonna end up going office keeper with him tonight, because I really have had it.
Yeah, a lot of parents get real upset with that. He's making weird like
Try adding PTSD.
my brother gave me this one. He lives there. He lives in Houston. This would be a good meeting to work to. Yeah. Oh, and we're over to the museum. I didn't realize how territory Texas is. That's still. That was funny. I looked at it.
So it is.
Texas, it looks like it was $12 million.
It's going to be a more complicated meeting than I thought.
You're welcome.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm hoping mine's relatively easy, but I know it's not. It's full of landmines itself. So hopefully the meeting report's good. Future financial.
All right. It is 10:37. We are back in order. The next item on the agenda is staff reports for 45 minutes. The floor is yours, Mr. Fishman. And welcome to your first LNC meeting as Executive Director.
Yes.
Thank you. It is my great privilege to rise before this august body, and it gives me joy to be employed in the service of liberty. That joy is slightly tempered because I have 5 days left working with one of the great professionals that I've known. Ms. Doherty did a wonderful job of transitioning me. She had a list of things that I had to learn. She made sure that we were on path all the time and on schedule. And as sad as I am to see her leave, I am pleased that I've made a friend as well as a colleague who I know is also dedicated to the cause of liberty and will continue to sustain the party as she sees we need her the most. So to that end, let me talk about what has happened since I took the job on April 15th. I moved into the office, came down from Boston, and became acquainted with the systems and the staff in place. One of the important things for me was to establish some rigor in how we did things. To that end, I've been a devotee of the Agile methodology, which includes a lot of things in terms of stating goals, but also improving communications. So we have a 11 o'clock Eastern stand-up. I would invite anybody who wants to get in on it. I can give you the link. It's available video or dial in. Nick has joined us at times. It is informative to hear what the staff is doing on a daily basis. In stand-up, we only say 3 things. We say what we did yesterday, why we did or did not accomplish our goals, and what we are going to do today. And then I get to take that information, follow up with people about, are we achieving our goals? Are we doing what we want to do? We are very goal-oriented now, and one of the things that we do is we do not begin a task unless we understand how we measure success and failure. It's critical that we are able to define failure beforehand, because otherwise we won't recognize it when we are failing. To that end, most of our goals that we're working on right now are goals that we can put very specific metrics to say we are succeeding or we are failing. Now we'll go into some of our future goals and how we're going to measure the things that we're doing. We've had some technology successes in the time that I have been there. We had, when I came on board, there was an issue with the performance of the CRM. On the advice of Mr. Mollman and Mr. Burns, we began the process of transitioning to a new hosting platform that will address some of the issues. However, In Sacramento, Mr. Molman and I were able to sit down and whiteboard a solution as to some of our technological issues, and we have fixed a lot of things up. And I have then been fastidiously collecting groups of the loudest complainers about the performance of the CRM, and the general consensus is that we have it running in a very good way right now. And so I'm pleased to report that the CRM project is succeeding right now. It is working, and in Mr. Molman's report, which I hope you all have read, he details how the Libertarian Party of Kentucky was able to use the CRM to open up 5 county chapters based on the data that was in there. I think that's the sort of success, the sort of data-driven success that we can hope to see as we see more adoption across the board of the CRM. I have moved the staff to the G Suite platform. It is Google's email base. We get a lot of wins out of that. Most importantly, though, we get top-level security, top-level spam filtering. I am convinced that if the Russians came for the Democrats, they're eventually going to come for us too. And so I want to be ready that we have the top level of security available. As of next month, we're going to turn on 2-factor authentication for our email site. We also are using the G Suite to archive all of our files. So we're in the process of moving every critical file away from somebody's computer and into our storage space on the cloud, where it is password protected and security protected, so that should we be hit by ransomware, which I anticipate an attack in that manner as well, we can just say, well, we'll just rebuild our computers because all of our information is stored. The other benefit of putting everything there is that now we have full text capability search of all the documents in the Libertarian Archive. If there are things that you think are important documents that we should be storing in this secure space, please forward them to me, and I will make sure that they're in there, make sure they're categorized, and we have the ability to open up permissions so that some things could be public and some things will be protected. There are team folders, so there's an operation folder and a fundraising folder and a membership folder. We are working to organize our information, our data a lot better. We are working to improve our outreach through technology. To that end, we have purchased a professional Zoom account for webinars, which I know a lot of people here have been using, and we have been organizing meetings available to the public where we will talk about libertarian issues and people can join in and raise their hands and ask questions and we answer them. We did a session on with Dr. Varner and Kara Schools where we talked about drugs and the availability of drugs and pain medication in the United States. We did a session on immigration last week. And we'll have more coming forward in the future. We need to use technology more effectively and outreach. In the next quarter, I intend to end our relationship with iContact. For those of you who have been receiving our emails, they have their logo on the bottom and they essentially will not take it off in spite of my attempts to negotiate that. So we are going to move to another mail provider, and I have become convinced that the CRM is actually capable of doing this. There's a product in there, and so I'm a big believer in eating our own dog food, so I will move us over to SparkPost inside of CRM as our dominant mail platform in the next 3 months. There is institutional knowledge currently contained within iContact, in particular the way the majority has run the emails that we send out over time, and I am studying that before we make the transition. Membership continues to decline, and there is no way to soft pedal that information. Those of you who have looked at the membership report or have seen my report will see the chart that chronicles that. There are a couple of issues around that, but I don't want to downplay it in any way. I have a vision going forward that with a membership of roughly 15,000 and an operating budget of $1.5 million, that should we get average member support at $100 a year, we pay all of our bills. I call this idea a quarter a day keeps the government away, and we will be working on a marketing program to that end. But I also want to increase membership, and in order to do that, we need for membership to have more value. As I talk about projects going forward in the future, we'll do that. But right now, I want to talk that our focus is on membership, and we have very specific metrics. Every day, I get a report, and the membership manager gives me a report on what happened the day beforehand. Membership is somewhat of a lagging statistic because somebody might sign up and it might take a while for it to go through the form and then to get it up. So I don't necessarily think of the daily numbers as an individual thing, but a week or a month to see where we're going, that's very important. So it is very important to me that we work to increase our membership and to change really what has been a long slide in our membership numbers, punctuated by occasional increases around popular campaigns. It is time for us to turn membership around, and I do intend to have this august body help me in that respect. Fundraising, I had the great privilege to learn from the Director of Development. The 4 aspects are fundraising: the email solicitations, direct mail, the LP store, and then specific contact with donors. Over the last 10 weeks, I've been learning to make phone calls. I've learned sort of the, I hesitate to say the art of the deal, but the idea of cultivating a relationship with a donor. And for somebody who's come in with more industrial background than fundraising, I have thrown myself into reading basic manuals, but also learning from the master. And so I look forward for our fundraising to be robust, and as we will talk further, talk about the idea of developing a full-time professional fundraising department. Operations, you guys get to see most of what we do from day 1 to day 2 because you'll hear about it in reports. We've had some issues with the building. The compressor blew. We'll manage to get it fixed, but we will be spending money out of the building fund to fix that. Hopefully we can make it through the summer, because I think it'll be cheaper to get it done a little bit later in the season, and at least right now it hasn't been, it's still functional. I have been doing the DC things, which are specified in the job description for the executive director. I presented at the American for Tax Reform breakfast. I have met at various points in time with other Washington Liberty organizations. Mr. Bishop Henchman was kind enough to invite me to a few events. And I am trying to represent the Libertarian Party as well as we possibly can. To that end, we also had 2 interns in this summer who were able to go out and do the exciting things that young people do that I'm not necessarily welcome at. And while they were there, they managed to say, I am an intern for the Libertarian Party, which was great, because when that message happened, that message resonated, people in DC know that we are here, we are making a presence, and we are talking about liberty. In the next quarter, we're going to do a couple of interesting things, and the first one I would talk about is the change in the development department. With the loss of Ms. Doherty, we are in the process of looking for a new director of development. I have sent the application, the basic advertisement for the position out to most of you. I have also started to proceed in talks with a few people, seeing if they would be interested, people who I know who have been very successful fundraisers in the past. At this point in time, the application is online at lb.org/director/of/development. And if you felt like you knew people that you would be good to that, I would certainly appreciate you sending a copy of it to them and CCing me so that I could begin direct consultation with them. As we go forward, I want to grow our department, as the chair has said. There is no question that there are more people out there right now interested in liberty and libertarian causes than there ever have been. And the nice thing about it is that the government keeps making more of them by infringing on people's liberty. So, to that end, we have to figure out what is the process by which we reach them, and a development department, a fully functional development department, is the one that gets us there. So I look forward to the idea of a director of development who will then work with me to the idea that we are going to expand to a full-fledged director of development. The 35% number, I believe that's what you said, Mr. Chair, is, I'm interested in getting towards that. I'm more of a gradualist in growing that way. I want to see where we go and how we grow. But I also have a vision of, as I said, the quarter day keeps the government away, that membership would eventually accomplish funding all of operations. And then fundraising would be able to target it more specifically to things. Instead of saying, can you give me $1,000 so that we can keep the lights on? I can say, can you give me $1,000 because I want to work on an education program. And speaking of the education program, one of the things that we envision bringing online in the next 3 months is I had a conversation with Mr. Nikela, and they were talking about using Moodle as an educational platform. For those who don't know, it is a distance learning platform. And I intend to, in the beginning, our very first usage of it is going to be to become certified to use the CRM. For those of you who have used it, there is some technical knowledge involved. Andy spends a great deal of time where he talks about how how he keeps teaching the same lesson over and over again. Distance learning is probably a phenomenal thing for that. Plus, we will be able to give out certifications, and you are now certified as a CRM user by the Libertarian Party. We tend to expand that to candidates, talking to Kara and Paulo, so that we would have certified Libertarian campaign managers, certified Libertarian treasurers, and I'll come to questions as soon as I finish. Ideally certified Libertarian candidates as well, so that we would have a basic understanding of what's involved in running for office. People would fulfill that, they would pass the class, and there's going to be tests in this class. It's not you go through and you just get it. We intend it to be academically rigorous. At the end of it, though, a candidate can then say, I'm a certified Libertarian candidate as of 2020, when they go out and talk to donors and say, this is an indication of, you know, how serious I am about the stuff that I'm doing. Likewise, I don't have to tell you, we have a shortage of campaign managers, but it doesn't necessarily have to be geographically located. Distance learning allows us to address some of those problems. So we're going to bring online a distance learning certification program. We're also going to bring online a members-only website. Those of you who remember the jacket from the 80s, I intend to put a picture of there up, but the idea that there is a value to be had by talking to our members on a regular basis is something that we have not pursued. For example, right now, if I wanted to know all the members, dues-paying members of the Libertarian Party who were interested in fathers' rights, I actually have no idea about how to get that data, because we haven't really had the capacity to record it other than, you know, through occasional paper polls that were sent back. So bringing the member site online via the CRM is something that Andy Burns and I are working on. We anticipate an October rollout for this, at which point in time we tend to use the member site to start polling members and to make information available for all of you. As an example, we could take a controversial issue of the day, is what do you think about open borders, and then report to you by state, by region, what the members reply to that survey. We also can accumulate some more statistics that will have validity behind them. For example, when somebody says, all libertarians believe X, we can say, well, no, actually, we have a polling group. It's only available to members of the Libertarian Party. Members of the Libertarian Party believe this. So bringing a member site online, I think, will add value to membership, will go towards our goal of increasing membership, and hopefully increasing member satisfaction will also allow us to increase the amount that we collect from each member, leading us to the quarter a day keeps the government away. And the last thing we want to do is we want to work towards strengthening the affiliates. I believe that, you know, it's wonderful to be here in Texas. I went down to San Marcos and met with the chair of the Hays County Party, and he talked about their county meetings where they would have 30 to 40 people on average. I thought that's a pretty good county meeting. And so recognizing the fact that different states and different affiliates have a stronger understanding of how to grow, we need to support the ones that don't necessarily get it yet. And so we are going to work towards establishing a contest. Thank you very much to the Affiliate Support Committee that has a contest going as well right now. We're going to establish a contest for the state affiliates where we would ask them to do things that we consider healthy. Have their members write letters to the editor, have regular meetups, take pictures of them, promote themselves, have candidates going out talking about some of their issues, doing activism. Encouraging all these things in the state affiliates, I hope, will bring us to a better connected idea of the affiliates and national working hand in hand. There is at some point in time a question as to what value national has offered the affiliates. I think that as we give them knowledge support and ego support, we will show them the right way. We can show some states the right way to grow your party, to be more successful. And that's one of the things that national should be doing at that point in time. And so to that end, I'd like to ask Ms. Doherty to give her report, and then we can both take questions together.
Thank you, Dan. So the last few months, a major priority for me has been getting Dan set up for success in his new role as executive director. Additionally, I have been working on a variety of projects, including overhauling LP Store. At the meeting last quarter, we talked about LP Store at length, and I said, you know, I think we can make this profitable. Let's change some things and see what happens. And I'm very pleased to report some substantial progress on that. So the historical data is that in first quarter and second quarter of 2017 and 2018, we lost about $7,000 each of those years during the first half of the year. In contrast, this year, in Q1 and Q2, we had a $14,000 profit. And this was done while spending substantially less money on LP Store. So we're spending less money and actually making a ton more money in comparison. So I'm very pleased with that. A lot of that has happened because we've made strategic decisions on items, looking at ROI, what will sell, what has a good markup, that sort of thing. We've tried some new things. We've offered a lot more variety on LP Store. People have responded very favorably. They enjoy seeing new things, and they enjoy seeing products that have porcupines or other things, not just our logo. When you expand the variety, you expand the outreach, right? Because many people don't want to wear an LP Store logo on their shirt. That's fine. That's fine. But we benefit very much from them wearing a porcupine logo on their shirt. So it expands our branding. It brings in money. It also brings in new contacts. So people who come to us through LP Store, many of them we've never had any contact with. So now we know, hey, look, this person's probably a libertarian if they're buying stuff on our store. We should go talk to them about joining the party or running for office, etc. So LP Store has turned over a new leaf, and I know Dan is committed to continuing that work moving forward, and I'm very happy about that. Nick talked some about Freedom Fest. This was my 4th Freedom Fest representing the Libertarian Party. I have seen over the last 4 years how our presence there has changed and improved. Each year it's significantly better than the previous year. We're getting more and more traction. We have more and more attendees coming up to us and talking to us. We have more people joining. In the past, we'd be happy if maybe 6 people became members at Freedom Fest. This year we had about 30. It's huge, huge change. We had these special issue campaigns that got people excited. We'd overhear conversations elsewhere, like in the hallways, people talking, not knowing that we're there, saying things like, "Did you see what the libertarians are doing?" You know, we had a buzz. We were creating this buzz out there with the attendees, and that was great. People came, picked up our literature. Grover Norquist came by when I was sitting there at the table, and I recognized him, and he's standing there nodding at the sign, and he says, "This is so great." It is a really powerful thing when we can get coalition partners to say our programs are exceptionally good. That is huge progress for us. So I'm very pleased about those 3 campaigns. Nick talked about them briefly, but I'll give you another overview. 22 trillion is about the national debt. We have one called America at Peace that's about foreign policy, and then we have tariffs or taxes. These are also beautiful because they are scalable depending on the resources we have. They're cheap, they're low commitment. Part of the reason we launched these was because a donor gave money in December of last year to help make them possible. He saw this as an opportunity to take advantage of strategic opportunities that the RSMPs are ignoring. Financially and on fundraising, we'll talk more about this shortly, but firstly, who here knows what our monthly burn rate is financially? So a few hands. So it's $109,000. For those who don't know. So $109,000. So every month I look at our numbers multiple times throughout the month. I calculate how are we doing, are we going to make our goal, are we going to break even, are we going to do better than breaking even, what do I have to do to make sure we break even, number one, and then obviously go as far beyond that as we can. So if you take $109,000, you multiply it by 3, so that's our quarterly number, so that's $327,000. You look at our historical numbers. Okay, so I obsess over the historical data because I want to know where are the trends, how are we looking compared to what we've done in the past, where are we going? And so when I was looking at these numbers recently, and I look at 10-year time spans. So how are we doing now compared to the last 10 years? All right, so we formed this development team, and I put it in quotation marks because it's very tiny. We formed it at the end of 2016, so it was December 2016. We did not have a fundraising department of any kind at that time. We did fundraising, clearly, but it was very hodgepodge. And throughout 2016, I've been telling Nick, hey, look, we need to do more of this. And he agreed with me, so he championed this with the board. And at the end of 2016, we were authorized to try this. So I divide things up. So 2017, 2018, and 2019 are when we have had some institutional fundraising program, right? 2016 I exclude because it's an outlier. It skews the data and is not indicative of what really the past has looked like. So you look at 10 years with the current segment of time where we've had fundraising department, chop out 2016, and then you look at the chunk before that going back to 2009. All right, so if our magic quarterly number is $327,000, in the last 2.5 years that I've been doing this job, we've hit that goal 9 out of 10 times. And that one time when we didn't hit, we were like half a percentage point away. We were very, very close. The previous section of time, from 2009 to 2015, we hit it 50% of the time. So 50% of the time versus 90% of the time. Big, big difference there. We have done this with a tiny team with very limited resources. So as I leave this job, I have 2 things I want to impart to you. We do need a fundraising department, and I've been saying this for 3 years now. We need a fundraising department. It needs to be a priority. We need to have a fundraising director who really knows what they're doing, and then we need to have fundraising staffers who are learning fundraising perhaps. They may not be seasoned professionals, but they are building that knowledge. They are committed to building those skill sets, and that they are working on specialized tasks. You know, I've been the jack of all trades doing all of it. We can't continue that way if we want to grow. But also, not just do we need the fundraising department, but we need to have fundraising be a significant priority for the organization. It just hasn't been. And the fact that you have one person doing it shows that it hasn't been a huge priority for the organization. And as a result, even though our fundraising numbers are far better than what we've had historically, we're still in the hole to the convention committee by a big chunk of money. We still have had financial struggles of several months ago when we had to dig ourselves out of a $150,000 hole. We don't want to end back up in that situation. And right now, the only thing keeping us from ending up in that situation is the convention funds. We can't go on like that. So, A, we need a fundraising department, but B, we need to be really, really serious about this. I also encourage you to really be thoughtful about who we hire to do this stuff. So, you know, I've had so many people come to me and they say, hey, Lauren, I want that job. And these are not people who've ever done fundraising before. And many of them really would not be good fits for the job. And I appreciate their interest, but one of the challenges we have in this organization is people think this is an easy job to do, which boggles the mind. Because I know how hard it is to do. And I know how nuanced it is to do all of the things I do. People don't see it because Lauren just takes care of it. So the analogy I used in my staff report is, you know, it's like being a chef or any other skilled profession, right? Now, I cook periodically. I do that. I am capable of cooking. But am I a skilled enough cook to go and be a chef? Not at all. I don't have the interest. I don't have the talent. I'm not going to go to cooking school. I'm not going to develop that skill set. So no one should ever hire me to be a chef, right? Now, there's restaurants who need chefs. But guess what? There's tons of people who do know how to be chefs. And any restaurant that wants to succeed needs to go hire a real chef. They shouldn't hire somebody like me who doesn't really have the credentials to be a chef. So my point is, there are real fundraisers out there. We have more ability now to bring one in, or several of them in, than we've had in quite a while. We need to pursue that. And if we don't bring in skilled people, we are going to suffer mightily. And the financial problems are going to get worse and worse and worse. And I'm telling you this as the person who has done this job and produced great results over and over. It is a nuanced skill set. So please prioritize that as you hire. And with that, we can open up to Q&A. Daniel?
Thank you. I have Ms. Van Horn, and then Mr. Bishop Benjamin, and then Ms. Billy.
This section
Exactly
right
right.
here.
I'm just going to go, Murderer's Row.
You mentioned the Moodle.
Yes.
I've used that with online educational platforms. It's really good. Gilletta Jarvis in New Hampshire is very proficient with Moodle. She has developed training classes and things like that, so that's someone you might want to reach out to.
I have a very strong personal relationship with Gillette.
Okay. Are you familiar with her knowledge and stuff that she has?
I was not directly familiar with her knowledge, but I
okay.
would definitely reach out
She
to
would
her
be
about
someone
that.
that would be excellent to communicate with if you were going to use Moodle as a training or educational platform.
That sounds great.
Point of inquiry.
Sure.
Could you describe generically what is Moodle?
Are you familiar, for people who don't understand what distance learning is essentially a method in which there's an instructional course online. Moodle is a platform for making that happen. The knowledge is stored, but it can be easily updated, kept current. Students can come in. It can either be straight through, you read this, you read that. You can put in tests to design to test knowledge. You can, at the end of it, have units and chapters build as complicated a course as you have. I professionally was in the business. I wrote the distance learning program that is used at Massachusetts General Hospital, which is the teaching college for Harvard Medical School.
I think one of the key things about Moodle is it's like a free open source.
Correct.
That's what
Right.
is something that is, otherwise we'd have to pay for some proprietary
Most
system.
people will be familiar with the dominant industry leaders of either Blackboard or Design to Learn. Moodle
Canvas,
is,
there's a whole bunch of them now. Yeah.
very competitive in that space. Mr. Bishop Henchman.
Yeah, I have 7 questions, but I'll do one at a time.
I only have 6 on my list.
Let me start with an easy one. The compressor explosion sounds scary.
Let's not get melodramatic here.
Has it impacted the habitability of the office?
So for one day, it was very hot. I ended up asking people to go home at noon. I stuck around, and Mr. Connell stuck around until it was repaired, which actually took a little more than a day. But currently, no. The building is very habitable. The temperature is comfortable at, I believe we keep it set at 74 during the day. Although I do anticipate at a point in time, I think we can save money by bringing a Nest or some smarter thermostat in to control things. You want me to come back to you for 2?
You had more questions.
I thought you had 6 more.
I do have 6 more, but, well,
So,
Mr. Chair, would you prefer?
How about I will just recognize people and direct traffic.
Thank you.
And then we'll go quickly. Ooh, look at everybody's excited now.
It's still my turn.
Well, so the question is, Mr. Bishop Henchman, do you want to keep going?
I
and
assume
monopolize
it would be,
time, or we would go around?
We go
Let's
around
go
and come back. But
we
yeah.
can come back. So I have next Ms. Billiou, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Goldstein, Ms. Adams, yeah? And then we'll come back around to Mr. Bishop Henchman in time.
My question is for Lauren, actually. Everybody in this room knows how many political operatives there are who want jobs with our party, who want jobs with other parties as well. And if we're going to be conducting a search for a professional fundraiser, can you speak to how important it is, or whether it is important or not, that that person be a truly committed libertarian and only libertarian, not libertarian leaning, or someone who just wants to advance their career in politics and thinks that we're a good place to start? Like, how important or impactful should that kind of thing be in the search?
I think a lot of that depends on the role. So it's very different if someone is the director of development going out and meeting with max donors than if somebody is very much behind the scenes doing donor research. So in fundraising, there's a number of tasks, right? And some are much more directly interfacing with donors than others. Then others are in between. So for example, writing fundraising letters.
Excuse me.
If you're not a devout libertarian, big L libertarian, how are you going to write a persuasive fundraising letter to libertarians? Also, if you're not a devout big L libertarian with some exposure to the party, you're unlikely to know the unique culture of this party. And that is very important when you're writing membership solicitations or interacting with donors. So I would say for the director level, they must be a devout big L libertarian. For very entry-level jobs, it's not quite as critical, but it is also very useful. A lot of it is, too, we're not going to pay as well as other fundraising gigs. And so somebody who's not really with us philosophically is very unlikely to take the job because they can go get paid 2 or 3 times more someplace else. So that helps weed some of that out. But I do think the philosophy is very important, but also the cultural awareness of the organization.
Mr. Phillips?
All right, once again, I don't have a question. What I do is a statement. And that is that since you've taken over, I've gotten nothing but positive feedback from everybody that you have dealt with in my region, including myself. So please continue the good work.
Here, here.
Mr. Goldstein?
I have some potential good news. Can you tell me exactly what happened to the compressor? It just broke.
I would refer to Mr. Kraus.
It's The original compressor, we have two compressors on the roof. One's like 19 years old, the other is 15 years old. The 15-year-old one is the one that kind of went kaput. The 19-year-old one is the one that's currently working but leaking like a sieve. And so the repair, they went out and they researched, and they were able to find a replacement compressor and fix the leak. And that's what's going to happen. So replace one of the two compressors, fix the leak, and it should buy us 2 to 3 years on our HVAC system. To replace the entire HVAC system would be $16,000 to $20,000.
Well, I've got some good news, Robert. I'm looking at the insurance policy for the building.
Do you know about insurance?
And we have something called mechanical breakdown coverage on the policy up to $16,556, something I just read. I think you ought to call up Hartford or whoever our rep is and file a claim and see if it's covered.
Okay.
I do believe from reading the definition in here that it's covered, and that could save the party some money.
As you read the policy, would that cover full replacement with a new system versus this Band-Aid?
Depends on what the adjuster says. As always.
Okay.
It's not, no, somebody suffered, if, you know, we lost something because of the breakdown, that they got just too hot and quit working, then that may not be covered, but the actual thing that breaks down is covered under the mechanical breakdown coverage.
Okay.
Okay. What happened, I mean, I know there were burnt parts. They showed me it. There was like a small fire in the compressor.
But that's definitely going to be
Pictures are good.
But the whole roof didn't burn down or anything. That
It
was
doesn't matter,
just-
it's going to cover what was damaged by it. And I'm sure that your contractor probably took pictures and could give you a
Well
written statement and stuff. The adjuster's going to want all that.
I mean, it's still up there, yeah.
I think we've either got a $500 or $1,000 deductible, so it's better than paying the whole chunk all at once.
Oh, yeah. No,
All
I'll
right,
definitely
jump
talk to Casey and see about that.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Ms. Ms. Adams.
So I just wanted to kind of jump back to something that Lauren said. Lauren has done incredible work for us, especially considering how very little we pay her. Okay, so let's get really honest. We've never paid what we should be paying a development director. And as we're moving forward, if we're going to be really serious about this, we really need to take a hard look at our numbers and see what we can come up with. Because if we're going to hire somebody to replace her, somebody who's even half as effective is going to cost us considerably more. Everybody needs to be aware of that. It's going to cost us the money, and we need to invest that money.
Seeing no one else seeking to be recognized right now, we're going to come back around to Mr. Bishop Henchman.
Okay. I'm the chair of the convention voting process committee. There I'm sure are a lot of other chairs of committees here. You mentioned the Zoom account. Is this something committees can use
Yes.
for our e-meetings? And if so, how do we do
Yeah,
that?
look, coordinate right now, the best person to talk about would be the membership manager because she's using it the most and maintaining the calendar for it.
Actually, per the
Alex Scott.
policy manual, the secretary is supposed to do that, maintain the calendar for all the electronic meeting rooms. We can talk outside the meeting, but.
Dr. Clark?
Would you be able to sort that out? and
Yeah,
report back?
I'll let you
Solve
know.
it, yeah.
I'll get with you, let you know.
Dr. Clark?
Mr. Fishman, thank you very much for your presentation. Admittedly, you're only in the job for a very short period of time. I, as a former national chair, was always worried about, with our staff, was the executive director receiving enough information from the LNC as to what we want? Do you feel that you're getting enough direction from the LNC as to what our goals are?
I do. I've been fortunate enough to have communication with many of you over the last time period. Either
That's not necessarily a help.
Well, so I will tell you that it is for me, and that one of the things I do want to talk about briefly. I have no ego in this job. You guys can tell me I'm wrong, and I will not be unhappy, and I will not be offended. You can expect me to make business proposals that I want you to consider, because I consider, he's not here, I can consider the chair, the head of the party, and the LNC to be the heart, and me the legs. I'm going to provide the best motor, the best method of motivation, moving from one place to another that I can, but you guys are going to steer us. And so I'm going to make a lot of suggestions. I'm going to throw things out. This is sort of my industry-based practice. If I'm going to give you we got this option, we got this option, we got this option. My job is to present you with options. At no point in time, if you say to me, that doesn't work for us, am I going to be offended? So, all the input that you can give me, I seek.
Mr. Lyons?
I'd like to ask about the ongoing search for for new development staff. In terms of, you mentioned that an advertisement was sent out. The application is live online. Where are we advertising the opening of the position? In terms of, are we doing it specifically on our own website? Are we going to be seeking job boards, Monster, Indeed, or things like that? How many people have already applied? And lastly, what does our development department ideally look like 3 to 6 months from now in terms of the hiring process?
I'll go in reverse order. 3 to 6 months from now, I envision that we have a director of development and we are working towards hiring more people coming in. Part of that leads into the second part, which is in terms of advertising it, although we have it on the website, I am going out and seeking people who have been suggested, or people I've known from other libertarian campaigns, or people I've known who I consider libertarians who have worked on other campaigns, and sent the application to them, usually in PDF format, but to go out there and pursue that opportunity. I agree with Ms. Doherty that fundamentally we need at least small L libertarian because of what we do. None of this works if, I talked about the LNC being the heart. None of this works if your heart isn't in it. And so the idea that we can find a fundraiser who has been successful working for, a progressive Democrat, it seems unlikely that would be a good fit. I wouldn't not listen to their pitch, but I suspect that our ground is going to be more fertile among libertarians. I recognize, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
If I should build on that, there are people in our party that are fundraisers that we don't even know. So for example, people who work for universities. Universities have big fundraising departments. We need to send that out to people who aren't just in the political spheres that we know. We need to send it out to a much broader list because we will find other people who have fundraising experience of significance already and who are big L libertarians.
So I have next on deck, I have Dr. Lark, Ms. Van Horn. I assume Mr. Bishop Henchman wants me to come around to him again. It's not wrong. Dr. Lark.
Well, I'm sorry.
And then Mr. Hewitt.
What I was showing my little son, the advertisement, if you will, where is it on the website? It's not easily found.
lp.org/director-
Would someone going to the website see it?
No. I am not inclined to post it on social media or in a way that would be easily found, just to keep it at a moderate pace.
I have Ms. Van Horn, Mr. Bishop Henchman, and then Mr. Hewitt.
Some of the people that just spoke prior to me almost covered what I was going to say, but when people said, where is it advertised, and you said, our website, that's not advertising. Sorry. Something on our website isn't advertising. No one is going to see that. And if it's only going to a few places, that's not advertising. So basically, we're not advertising it.
I would agree with that.
Yes. So is there a plan to do so?
If we don't progress in the next 2 weeks, I will open it up to a larger group. I would be inclined to go through one of the more professional websites rather than posting it out there.
I agree. Like general isn't. It should be specified.
Exactly.
But
something
you have to get it out there so people are going to know.
Indeed is my preferred one. I don't know if there's one that's better for fundraisers, but I will investigate that as we go forward.
Thank you.
And Mr. Bishop Henchman, Mr. Hewitt, and then Ms. Billieu, was that your hand?
Nope.
I missed it. Okay.
There is a fundraisers association that I'll find it and send
Thank
it
you.
to you. Sorry to break the momentum on this one. I'm going to other things. Dr. Moulton a couple of weeks ago flagged ongoing issues with members' ability to read the public version of the LNC list, the email list. Where are we at on resolving that issue?
So I had suggested in that thread way back when that we can move it over to a Google group and solve all the problems once and for all. I would, as I said in the email, advise the LNC to take that up. because it is now a turnkey solution. There will be no more technical need because it's a system that is being run by other people and is mostly unbreakable. And so I would suggest that that is the right alternative going
So we have
forward.
to take some kind of action.
I mean, as I put in there, and I think you have seen my emails that have gone out to LNC Gmail migration, that, you know, we've been using them. Pretty much everything I've sent to you guys has gone through that. And as far as I know, it's working pretty well, and we can do other groups through that as well. And so upon your approval, I would be happy to do that. I saw Ms. Harless's hand go up first, but if you don't object, I'll take Mr.
I got it. So I have Mr. Hewitt, then Mr. Molman without objection, then Ms. Harlos, then Mr. Goldstein.
As far as fundraising goes, in my own experience, in my campaign, I had to pretty much cold call a lot of people. I had some relationships with some libertarian donors, which helped quite a bit. However, once I was elected, and once a very large fundraiser himself, who had ran against me in not only the primaries, but then changed to my opponent, had gone against me twice and realized that I was the winner. Once I was, it's very easy when somebody has a book. It is so easy when I go over to his office and he sits down and he says, call them, and them. I mean, it is like, and we're fighting an uphill battle. If there is somebody, we have right now, both other major parties are about ready to implode. They have divisions and everything, and there's a lot of really great people in there that don't like where it's going. And we come over and they say, hey, look, we are this party that stand for that. They don't have to necessarily be a large L libertarian. If they've got the book and they have proven fundraising ability, overnight we can start seeing huge amounts come in. But this, again, I don't want to exclude somebody that comes in and says, hey, this is what I do. Think about a real estate broker who has that book. They're so successful because they have all the connections. They know their friends have sold houses, this and that. We are trying to reinvent the wheel. What we're losing here is someone who had that book with large libertarian donors and stuff, and she's going to be passing it on somewhat, but especially large donors, that's a very, very personal relationship. And they want, you know, you've got to be able to ask. It's, again, this is some of the hardest stuff you can do. If you can't ask, you have no business being in that business. But asking, understanding how they are, you know, showing up, doing everything. But if we get somebody that already has a book in any area, and we're talking about national anyway, but there's a lot of very wealthy libertarians all over the United States, and if we can't tap them and let them know what we're doing and show them success, then we'll stay small. Great.
Time has expired.
Is there objection to extending for 5 minutes? Hearing no objection. Without objection, we'll go to Mr. Molman, then Ms. Harlos, then Mr. Goldstein. And then back to Mr. Bishop Henchman.
I just wanted to comment on the email list issue in that we already have, and this has been going on for quite some time before my involvement in maintaining the assets, what's known as the reflector, which already goes out to Google, puts the list onto Google, every message goes in. It is my understanding that the people complaining about the format of the archive also find Google to be unacceptable as well. And so at some point it becomes a question of no matter what we do, we get complaints, and what is the best use of volunteer and staff time to resolve, which is why, you know, things like the CRM project get higher priority than I don't like the format of this email. So that is why that has been that way. I do intend on getting back to that, but as the not paid volunteer that works on it, and with a job and a family and other things that I must do, it's a matter of prioritization to what is the best use of my time, and quite honestly, and if other people want to help, cool, awesome, you know, we're vetting and that, but I'm Mr. Chair, I mentioned on your Facebook, I think about a week and a half ago, looking for 6 volunteers to take 6 of the things that I do off of my plate. Please step forward if you would like to help and have the skills and willingness and follow through to do it. But that is the main issue that I see with the mailing list, is that even the proposed solutions are unacceptable, and at some point just go whatever, and you move off to the projects that are netting better results.
Mr. Fishman, did you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to add to that. I neglected to mention in my staff report that I have in great appreciation of the technical things that Mr. Molman has done for me and the hours that he has put in, I have given him the title of system architect for the Libertarian Party because he truly is, in the professional level, that is an industry term, fulfilled that function, something that we would be paying a great deal of money for otherwise. And so I just wanted to recognize that in
It came with a huge pay increase. I mean, 6 times as much as I used to.
All right, we have Ms. Harlos, Mr. Goldstein, Mr. Bishop Henchman, and Mr. Lyons.
Yeah, with the Gmail thing as well, I think we should just wait for when Ken has time. Putting all of our eggs in a Google basket doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
I would say that chances are pretty good in evaluating it from a technical side. Hosting it ourselves is the most dangerous thing we can possibly be doing.
Well, we have it in 2 places right now. We have it on Google and ourselves. And our Piper Mail list, there are people who like, Mr. Moulton likes to do spreadsheets of all these, and the way you can analyze that data and sort it and download it is useful for people who are trying to do critiques of the LNC's voting records and things like that. And even though, you know, I understand something not being a priority, I'd like to remind everyone though, a readable list is in our bylaws. It's not really like an optional would be nice thing.
If it is truly an impetus that we should get that done, I would suggest taking the industry standard solution, which is available now and could be implemented immediately.
Mr. Goldstein?
My question's been answered, thank you.
Mr. Bishop Henchman?
Apollo Pazell in his report requests a $10,000 travel budget and 2 interns to carry out the activities that he's laid out. I haven't seen a motion in that regard, so do you endorse those requests from him, and if so, what should we do about it?
I think that if we look back at the electoral success, such as it was, we had over the last year, Mr. Pazell's involvement has been critical, and I am supportive of what he is doing. I am more inclined to say that there could be a line item and we would evaluate things as it happened, as opposed to a carte blanche.
Okay, and Mr. Lyons, then Mr. Redpath.
Back to the development search. When did the applications open, and what is the exact plan for what dates we plan on moving forward with certain parts of the process in terms of selection, interviewing, and hiring?
There are no exact dates. This is not I'm going to take the wrong person because the date has arrived. I will proceed with as much expediency as I can, however, with the caution that I believe the position is due. I'm much more inclined to work with people who I know to be professionals, and should I not be able to pursue that, then I'm going to open it up to a larger group. I think 2 weeks is, the criteria that I'm looking at. There have been a couple people that I've spoken to who, unfortunately, the salary, et cetera, just isn't going to make it work for them. So as we open it up to a larger group, as I said, that's a 2-week thing, but I have no definitive timeline. Part of that is based on the fact of the other proposal that I sent out to you, which is that I have asked the chair to come in and work as a contractor, and I recognize we're probably not going to talk about that at all, but I think that that might have been a joke. I think that part of my planning is based on the fact that I believe that there is a financial security for the next few months based on, I put this to the chair. I won't say that I twisted his arm. On the other hand, I asked him in terms of capacity. And I said before, this is not an ego thing for me. I am presenting it to you as a business option. It is the one that I perceive as the best business option, because looking at the numbers and looking at where I want to be and the money I want to raise, I can say, I want to know if you're going to be successful in raising this much money over this period of time. And in a short-term contract, we have the ability to say what is failure and what is success. Failure is not reaching the number that we agree upon, and success is. Based on that, we can make a decision as to whether or not we would renew a contract. As we proceed forward, I am thinking about what is the number going to be. I think about the capacity that I know that the chair has. demonstrated a couple times in terms of reaching out to some major donors, but also the relationships that he has and the unique position that the chair is in. We have, the chair is going to have a media appearance relatively soon on a cable news show in the morning that most of you probably watch. When that happens, he's going to be talking about the party, and ideally he's going to be talking about some of the changes that are going to be happening in the growth. That sort of thing is unique. Only the chair gets the opportunity. As much as I think that we should put Mr. Smith on television, they're not coming and looking for him immediately right now, but they are coming and looking for the chair. And when he's able to do that, when he appears on television, this is the model that I am blatantly stealing from Young Americans for Liberty. Okay, they hired a publicist, they put Cliff Maloney on television, and then everybody wants to meet with Cliff in person. He gets to ask them for money. We should be doing that right now. Increasing that thing, increasing the profile of the chair, putting the chair in that position right now in a contract gets us to say, maybe Dan's wrong. I want to set up a situation where we're going to have data where I can be proved that I am wrong on this, and if I'm wrong, I'm going to stop doing it. But I'm doing it right now, and I'm proposing it right now because I think it is the path to success. Let's have a measurement for failure and a measurement for success, and let's go forward with that. I do want to have a complete development team. The chair is not a complete development team, nor should he ever be. A complete development team includes the people that are doing things that would be a waste of the chair's time. So in building that full-fledged development department, I'm looking for the path that gets me there. And the 35% number, I talked about the fact that we have a disagreement because I have the idea that membership is going to grow into something that is much larger than it is. We should be very happy if we have the problem where we don't reach the 35% because membership is pulling in such a larger percentage.
So, just to be clear,
Mr. Chairman, we're way out of time.
We're out of time. Is there a motion to extend?
I'll move.
For how long?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Is there objection?
Yes.
There is objection. All in favor of extending for 5 minutes, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, sorry. Please keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Did you? Yeah, okay. So 8.
Requires 2/3.
It does require 2/3. We will not be extended in time. Time has expired on this item. We did have Mr. Redpath, Ms. Van Horn, and Ms. Harlos seeking to be recognized, but with no extension of time, we will proceed to the next item.
And a
on
point
the
of information.
I'd be happy to answer.
I will be available to go to lunch with anybody who wants to talk.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move to suspend the rules to amend the agenda to add 2 items to new business without previous notice.
Oh boy.
Yes. The first item would be moving our LNC email list to Google or whatever formulation the executive director suggested that.
Okay.
And then the second item would be amending the budget to accommodate Mr. Pizel's request for a $10,000 line item.
Is there a second for that motion to suspend?
Second.
Okay. Is there objection? How long on each item?
10 minutes each.
10 minutes each. Is there objection to adding those 2 items to the agenda? That would be moving the list to Google and amending the budget for Pizel.
Actually, I do object to the first one,
Me
Mr. Chair.
too.
Okay.
I think
Then-
that's just merely, that's micromanaging
The-
what staff does.
I get, you don't get to talk to the objection.
sorry.
The objection is noted, so we're not going to do it without objection. We will now vote on whether to suspend the rules to add those 2 items.
Move to
Can we split
divide.
the, second, let's split, not combine.
If there's no objection, we will take them up separately. Okay, good. We'll start with the motion to suspend the rules to amend the agenda to add moving the list to Google for 10 minutes at the end of new business without previous notice. All in favor of suspending the
Could I
rules?
speak to?
It's a suspension of the
It's a
rules.
suspension of the rules. I don't think you get to speak to it. So it's, and I would like to take them as both the motion to suspend and adding the 10 minutes as one vote. Goes quicker. So that's what we're gonna do unless anyone objects to that.
Point of inquiry,
Yeah.
Mr. Fishman is migrating to G Suite, so this question would be whether or not we want that to continue.
No.
It would be a discussion of moving the mailing list to
LNC list.
the LNC list,
The whole.
LNC-business@hq.lp.org. So, motion to suspend the rules and add that to the agenda for 10 minutes. All in favor of that suspension of the rules and adding it to the agenda, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Needs 2/3.
Takes
Failed.
Yeah, failed.
2/3.
Looking, I think we have a
Eight
special.
14s fails.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about
We have a special
my
rule,
role,
I'm just
but I'm not going to do anything like that. So that failed, that is not added. The second is the motion to suspend to add $10,000 to the budget line to support Mr. Pizel's project. Is there objection to that motion to add that to the agenda? Hearing no objection to that, we will allow that suspension of the rules and the addition of that 10 minutes without objection.
I would like to move to suspend the rules to add an agenda item.
Okay, motion to suspend the rules to add an agenda item for Ms. Harlos.
Because I missed it during the agenda.
What agenda item?
The brochure issue. I think Mr. Longstreth and I got confused at the beginning there. I asked for that to be on there, and it's not on there.
Correct, I misread.
Yeah, because I think we were talking
wait,
about two
time
different
out.
things.
What is the thing you want to add?
A motion, I've already submitted the motion ahead of time about developing brochures, position paper brochures, 10 minutes.
Is it in the one note?
It is.
So it's a motion, it's not coming up in my email search, but that can be tricky. So it's a motion to add,
Move that a portion of the party website be dedicated to downloadable informational brochures providing greater details on libertarian solutions to specific issues.
okay.
What that's
That's the motion to suspend the rules to add 10 minutes for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there objection to that suspension of the rules to add that agenda?
Where is that, Mr.
It would be at the end of new business without previous notice, right after the new amending the budget for Mr. Pizel. I did not hear an objection. Is there an objection I didn't hear? Then we'll add those 10 minutes for that. Is anyone else trying to take advantage of the fact that we're kind of between items and in limbo land?
Point of information.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
On Mr. Bishop's one that we did not add, just a question, does that actually require LNC approval, or is that just something that the staff can handle? Because that was his objection.
I asked that question,
So-
and the executive director said
I'll
he
give
needs
you-
guidance from us.
I'll give you the answer, is the staff could do it without LNC direction, but LNC direction would make it clear, is what I understand. All right. Anything else before we move into the next item on the agenda, which is the 30 minutes Mr. Lyons requested for the financial future of the party?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, I
Dr. Lyons.
just assume that our special counsel is available at any time, or is there?
Mr. Kraus?
Because in the past, we've usually done
Call
these.
him. Do we have an idea when we want it?
So we are at 11:40 now.
12:40 his time.
12:40 in Eastern Standard or Daylight. This would take us to 12:10 with the 30 minutes, and so orders of the day would push the special counsel's report to after lunch.
So like 2-ish.
Somewhere between 1:30 and 2.
Okay.
Maybe 1:30 and 2:30.
My point of information was
Is whether or not we have him.
Is yes. Does he have some idea of when we're likely to call?
Mr. Kraus is making that happen. Or rather inquiring of that. And if there is a time issue with
I will let you know.
Mr. Hall, he'll let me know and we can deal with our agenda at that point. Thank you, Dr. Lark. All right, so now we're moving into 30 minutes to discuss the financial future of the party. Mr. Lyons, go ahead.
Would we like to deal with this in the executive session?
That is up to the body. This
Are there
is,
subjects that are
there are
appropriate
subjects
for
that
executive
would be
session?
properly in executive session, both personnel matters, compensation matters, legal and strategic stuff. There's a lot of things that can be in executive session or would be appropriate for it. There are also discussions that we've had about strategy and vision that we've had in open session. So I will leave it to the discretion of the members of the LNC what they want to talk about publicly and what they don't want to talk about publicly, because I serve at your pleasure. Go ahead, Mr. Lyons.
I'd like to move that we go into executive session and discuss financial and personnel matters.
Second.
Including staff, excluding staff?
Excluding staff.
excluding
All
staff?
staff.
All staff.
Okay. That is, so there's a motion to rise into executive session to discuss financial and personnel matters without any staff present. Is there any objection to rising into executive session at this time? Dr. Lark, is that a question or an objection?
I apologize because this is a bit awkward. Again, we have guests here, so if we're going to go into executive session, we may want to make sure that our schedule is such. We're also going to entertain a lunch period, though not here.
We will go on a break.
So yes, what we ought to do is make clear what we're going to do because our guests are here. They should know when we're going to be available in open session.
And I would suggest, even though it's not technically proper under Roberts, that if we choose to rise into executive session, or go into executive session and later rise from it, that we set a time certain, even though technically we can't set a time certain, that we do it anyway. That way we can tell everybody when they can come back to our room, and they can make plans accordingly. That's just courtesy to the people who don't get to be in executive session. So, returning to where we were, Mr. Lyons has moved to go into executive session. I asked whether or not there's anyone who objects to going into executive session at this time. Is that an objection?
It's an objection based on his movement for executive session. I would like to include Ms. Doherty and Mr. Fishman in that executive session.
Okay, so I'll get to that.
Point of information.
Yes.
What I was going to ask a second before you said that was, do we need to clarify that maybe staff needs to be available in case we want them to come back in or something? But you want them in no matter what.
I'd like them in regardless.
Okay. So that's a difference of opinion on what the motion for executive session is, and that will resolve there. Is there anyone who objects to rising into executive session before we have public discussion? That's the question I'm asking.
Here,
That's an objection.
that's an objection.
Okay.
I think that's what I'm objecting to.
Okay.
We have, 20 minutes for what was normally our scheduled lunch, so we're just going to, if we did go into executive session, there's no guarantee it would be for 30 minutes because.
Well, that's why I suggested that we have a guarantee.
Right.
So that part.
I think the timing of this is, I would rather have lunch now, go early and then come back and do it. But.
Mr. Redpath?
I'd rather go to 12:30 personally. I mean, can we make it to 12:30?
Well, we'll get to that answer later because I want to try and keep this stack resolvable. Mr. Phillips objects to going into executive session.
Correct.
I believe, I cannot remember, is it debatable or not?
It should be debatable, but I think the motions to amend the motion to remove the exclusion of staff should be handled.
Well, I'm just making sure we have
Yeah.
we are allowed to have debate on whether or not to go into executive
Yeah, I think
session. So Mr. Phillips, you're recognized for that purpose.
I don't believe that this is a subject that should be handled in executive session unless we're going to be explicitly detailing employee compensation or contractor compensation. This is a matter that affects the entire party, that many, many people are interested in, that can drastically affect the direction of the party, and I believe that our constituents deserve the opportunity to observe this conversation.
Other people seeking to be recognized on whether or not to rise into or go into executive session. Ms. Billiou, Mr. Redpath, Ms. Harlos.
I'll ask the maker of the motion, do you intend for those things to be part of the discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Redpath?
I would say we better err on the side of going into executive session and then leave it up to the committee. If we are venturing then into areas that don't need to be in executive session, then we open things up. But it looks like some sensitive material Mr. Lyons would like to discuss. I think that there's valor in discretion, and I would support going into executive session.
Ms. Harlos?
Yeah, I think we're going to end up to need to, and I want to remind everyone afterwards, we could always choose to disclose things that happened in it. That's always within our power, that to vote to say, well, we're going to, reveal what was discussed. But I think we're just going to end up going into executive session anyway.
Okay. Mr. Hewitt?
Unless it deals directly with compensation for Lauren or Dan, I agree with John that we should have, Richard, that we should have.
Okay, so.
A point of inquiry,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Is that really true? I mean,
is what really
Might
drew.
might there be personnel matters that are not compensation related that would need to be discussed in executive session?
There may be, but asking if it's really true, I mean, you're asking me to make an opinion on discussion, which I'd rather not do much. Dr. Larkin.
Mr. Chairman, employee performance very well may have something to do with this, and that is perfectly appropriate for executive session.
Ms. Carlos?
Are we discussing the amendment now?
No, there's no amendment been made.
Okay, because Mr.
We are
Hewitt-
still whether or not we go in or not.
Okay, I'll wait.
So that's Mr. Redpath.
Inquiring minds would like to know when our council's available.
He has
Mr.
not
Kraus.
responded yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I believe the order of operations is, it makes the most sense to do the amendment first before we decide whether or not to go in, because people may change their vote about whether or not we go in based on who's going to be there. Is that
Reading the room, I will withdraw my objection. Can I do
okay? You can. That's fine. All right. So is there no objection to rising into executive session generally? Hearing no objection generally to the concept, then Mr. Longstreth is recognized to move to amend the motion to go into executive session to add Mr. Fishman, Ms. Doherty, Mr. Kraus as well, or no? Just tell me where you're at.
I don't think so.
Okay, so Mr. Fishman and Ms. Doherty. Is there a second for the amendment?
Objection.
Well, I know there's an objection. Second. I'm saying there's a second for the amendment. Okay, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Key players, right? So Lauren's been running it for a while, Dan's newly taken over. I think both of their opinions are absolutely critical to determining a variety of topics, both related to employee performance, possible compensation. We're looking at adding a new department. This directly and intimately involves both of them, and so that's why I propose this.
Dr. Lark, then Ms. Harlow, then Mr.
Point of
Lyon.
information.
Yes.
Sorry. Let us say that we go into executive session having approved the amendment that we would include Mr. Fishman and Ms. Doherty. Would it then be appropriate, if there is a decision within the executive session, to ask one or both of them to leave?
I would find that in order.
That would be considered in order.
I would consider in order.
Thank you.
Ms. Harlos, Mr. Lyons, Ms. Bilyeu, Mr. Kraus, is that an update on council?
It is, and he's available at 3 p.m., 2 p.m. our time.
Okay, that answers that. Ms. Harlos?
Yes, I'm in opposition to that. I think it's incredibly awkward in the middle of a conversation to ask someone to leave. And their staff, they can be outside. I think it's more appropriate to ask them to come in rather than ask them to leave. And judging from what I think the nature of the discussion would be, I do not think we're going to have the most fruitful discussion having staff in the room. Just frankly, I just do not think that's appropriate at this point.
I have Mr. Lyons, Ms. Bilyeu, Ms. Doherty, Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Redpath. Go ahead.
Yes, I would prefer if the staff were outside the room, and if we need them, we can ask them to come in. I think we've already interviewed them.
I totally agree with that, Karen.
No crosstalk.
Because if you ask someone to leave.
No
they just-
crosstalk,
Yeah.
please. Mr. Lyons, continue.
We've had opportunity to ask them questions on this topic, and I would prefer to go into executive session. And if we have more questions, we can come out or invite them in, whatever we need to do. But at this time, I prefer going to executive session with the LNC exclusively.
Ms. Bilyeu.
My question was to the staff members in question. Would they be amenable to lingering for that purpose if we did want them to come back?
Mr. Fishman.
You pay me to do that.
Ms. Doherty. Okay. Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Redpath. Sorry, Ms. Doherty. I apologize.
So as the fundraising director, and as the person who dug us out of this huge financial hole, with a little bit of help from certain people, but a lot of it was me and Robert making that happen, I think I am preeminently necessary in a conversation of this nature about finances and fundraising. Not a single person has come to me and said, hey Lauren, how do we build a robust fundraising department? Not a single one. So I think I very much need to be in that conversation. I think I need to be in almost all of it. I can see certain circumstances where I might be asked to leave, and I'm okay with that. But the idea of not having me in there, when I am the expert on both of these topics in recent times, is highly problematic.
Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Redpath.
It is very, very common, and I've been in a lot of executive sessions on at least 2 government bodies, that unless a staff member were talking about compensation or performance, then we do have our executive in there. And as far as I know, this doesn't directly affect either Mr. Fishman or Ms. Dougherty, and I think it's important.
Mr. Phillips?
Pretty much covers it. I'm assuming that we're going to be discussing Mr. Fishman's proposal, and so I would like him in the room to be able to speak to it. And Ms. Dougherty, as she so eloquently explained, is the expert on the subject, and her opinion would be invaluable.
Mr. Redpath?
I think it's better to have, I hear what Lauren, Ms. Dougherty just said, but we don't know where this conversation is going to go initially. I think it would be most prudent to have staff outside and called in case the body thinks that they would, that we would benefit from their presence. But until then, we don't know where this conversation is going to go.
Mr. Hagan, then Mr. Goldstein, then Mr. Smith.
Call the question. You beat me to it.
Mr. Hagan has moved to end debate on the amendment. Is there objection? Oddly, hearing no objection to ending debate, we will move to a vote on the amendment. A yes vote would move us into executive session with staff, Mr. Fishman and Ms. Dougherty. A no vote would leave us with the motion to go into executive session without staff, pursuant to Mr. Lyons' initial motion. Is this necessary to be roll call?
Yes.
Okay. Then go ahead and take the roll.
Ms. Billieu?
Pass.
Mr. Bishop Henchman?
Aye.
I forget what the aye and the noes were.
All right, I'll say it one more time. A yes vote is for Mr. Longstreth's proposal to have the staff included in the executive session. A no
No.
vote is Mr. Lyons' proposal to not have them included at the outset of executive session. So wherever you want.
Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hagan?
Yes.
I will vote no. Mr. Hewitt?
Yes.
Dr. Lark?
Nay.
Mr. Longstreth?
Yes.
Mr. Lyons?
No.
Ms. Mattson?
No.
Mr. Merced?
Yes.
Mr. Nikela?
Vote aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Redpath?
No.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Van Horn?
Oh, I said no.
Oh, and I had a pass of Ms. Billieu.
I abstain.
Okay, 1 second, and I'll let the chair know what we got here.
Are you skipping this? Not
I
voting.
didn't add it up for
Mr.
me.
Bishop?
Are you not voting?
She's going to tell me whether.
Yeah, we have 1 abstention and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses, and 6 noes.
I will not vote. The motion passes, or the motion to amend passes, which means the current motion on the floor is to rise and go into executive session with Mr. Fishman and Ms. Dougherty in the executive session. Mr. Redpath?
This may not be kosher under Roberts, but I would move to go into executive session and break for lunch when at no later than 12:30 or when we rise from executive session, if before.
That was what I was hoping people would do, is say that there's a time certain, assuming that there's no objection from either Mr. Longstreth or Mr. Lyons to putting 12:30 as a suggested cap on how long we're in it. We can do that.
No objection.
And Mr. Lyons? I mean, technically it's the body's motion, but, I mean, does that work for you to have a target to get out of it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that, Mr. Smith?
I was just wondering if it would be proper to make a motion to table until after lunch, since Mr. Oliver won't be here until at least 2 o'clock anyways.
think the motion to table would be in order, but I'm gonna ask, is there a second for that?
Yes, second.
And so this would be a motion to basically recess for lunch now and then come back with our lunch and start doing
At
this?
1:30. Or we could do, if people wanted to do it during lunch, that would be fine too, but.
Oh, we're gonna do
So,
that.
so who's all in favor of that? Raise your hand.
Of tabling.
Oh,
Yep.
Until
Break it,
after
who's in
lunch.
favor of breaking the lunch?
Yes.
Yes.
Break for lunch, yeah, let's do it on a full statement.
So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that fails. We'll now move to a vote on the motion to go into executive session with Mr. Fishman and Ms. Doherty with the target of being out of executive session by 12:30 on or about. Do we want roll call on this or can we do show of hands? Oh, look, hands. No one's asked. So all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? I have 3 against and a lot for. We will go into executive session at this time. Please turn off all your recording devices. Please turn off the web stream. Please make sure everyone who's not members or Mr. Fishman and Ms. Doherty are out of the room.
Mr. Chairman, for the people, may I ask, when do you anticipate going in, let's say we break for lunch at 12:30 Central, when do you think we will come back? Let's assume we come back into open session. Do you want to set a time for that?
Probably at 2.
Probably
or thereabouts, 1:45-ish. Yes.
Okay. We about the time?
On YouTube. Pause.
I don't have
Hey, Dan.
Like somebody said, break. I need to